Chapter 495. Once she woke up, not only did Imo put down her psychological burden, but she could also do a lot of things. For example, Yang Qingji. Yang Qingji was also in the underground palace, and he was practicing prime demon technique. This was what Jing Xingji told Fei Fei, but because she was worried about Qin Shi, she never went to see him. Now that Qin Shi was awake, it was a good time to go and see the situation. Qin Shi naturally went with her. He was also very curious about prime demon technique. This thing appeared in the 5-spirit sacrifice temple and was extremely powerful. It definitely wasn't an ordinary technique, but he didn't know its origin. Fei Fei led the way, and the two of them soon reached the place where the prime demon steel was. Compared to the Vermilion Bird main hall, the prime demon steel was located in a cave behind the sacrifice temple. The cave wasn't big, at most 100 feet deep. It was almost undecorated, as if it was just an abandoned cave carelessly opened during the construction of the sacrifice temple. The prime demon steel was located in the center of the cave, emitting a dense but restrained devil aura. The road leading to the cave was covered with corpses. These were demonic creatures formed due to the leakage of the prime demon aura. Some were demonic beasts, and some were refined corpses. Right now, all the devil aura on their bodies had been sucked dry, turning them into dead creatures. There was a layer of restriction at the entrance of the cave. From Mo Tianga's perspective, this restriction had the power of at least a nascent soul cultivator, and it was very exquisite. It would be very difficult to break it. Next to the restriction at the entrance of the cave, Guifang Demon Lord sat cross-legged. His pale face was even paler, and he was no longer breathing. In the depths of the cave, Yang Qingji sat cross-legged, completely unconscious. He was immersed in the devil aura as if he was wholeheartedly trying to refine it. This is. At first glance, Mo Tianga felt that Jing Xingji's judgment was correct. Guifang Demon Lord's posture was obviously to maintain the restriction until he died of exhaustion. But the problem was that Guifang Demon Lord was a late nascent soul cultivator. Although he didn't have much lifespan left, he had advanced to the late stage many years ago. He had great divine power and was very powerful. Besides, the reason why nascent soul cultivators were hard to kill was because of their survival ability. Even if their bodies were destroyed, as long as their nascent souls were alive, they wouldn't die. Guifang Demon Lord was only a body now. Did his nascent soul abandon its body, or did it die together? If he had abandoned his body, why would there be a nascent soul restriction here? If they were to die together, then what was the reason that he could not even care about his own life? Was it really to protect Yang Qingji? Mo Tianga and Qin Shi glanced at each other and saw the doubt in each other's eyes. "Senior brother, what do you think?" Qin Shi muttered to himself for a long time before he finally shook his head. "It's hard to say. However, what's certain is that this brat is still in the core formation realm, so he's nothing to worry about. As long as Yang Qingji remained in the completion level, he and Jing Xingji could form an absolute suppression. Even if he advanced to the nascent soul realm, Qin Shi was confident he could still kill him. Previously, he killed Mi Feng, who also cultivated the primordial devil art and whose cultivation level was already in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Mo Tianga wasn't too worried about this. There was no direct conflict of interest between them and Yang Qingji. Instead, they were trapped in the Immortal Palace together. It could be said that they were in the same boat, and the possibility of cooperation was very high. But the problem was, do you think that the Ghost Square Demon Lord is really dead? Qin Shi was a little stunned. "You mean, I'm just doubtful." Mo Tianga frowned and said, "I really don't believe that a famous great cultivator in the late stage of the nascent soul realm would die like this." His body was still there, but his aura was completely gone. If he didn't die, he must have been possessed. Looking at Yang Qingji, who was wrapped in devil aura, She pondered for a while and nodded slowly. Your worries aren't unreasonable. According to reason, the Ghost Square Demon Lord racked his brains to come to this immortal palace to seek fated chances for the deification realm. How could he easily give up unless he was at the end of the line? But it's completely unnecessary to say that he was possessed. You said the Ghost Square Demon Lord didn't have much time left in his lifespan, right? Yes. I once heard that even if he used all methods to extend his lifespan, the Ghost Square Demon Lord's lifespan wouldn't exceed 500 years. It's already not easy to find even one of those methods. According to common sense, his lifespan would be more than 100 years at most. That's right. She said, the lifespan after possession is calculated by the age of the nascent soul. Even if the Ghost Square Demon Lord possessed someone, his lifespan couldn't be increased. But this guy is only in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Even if he practiced the primordial devil art and his strength greatly increased, he could only reach the peak stage of the core formation realm in the near future. In more than 100 years, let alone the deification realm, even if he successfully formed his nascent soul, could he cultivate to the late stage of the nascent soul realm? According to common sense, it's indeed impossible. In addition, unless it's absolutely necessary, I really don't understand why he would stay here instead of going out. Mo Tiange felt Shi's words made sense. In this immortal palace, there was no way out. So what if he reached the deification realm? Did he really expect to cultivate to the void refinement realm and body integration realm or break through the void here? Other people weren't like her, who received Fu Yaozi's inheritance and knew about the Xuanchu cloud connecting formation. However, the matter of the Ghost Square Demon Lord was indeed full of doubts. If they wanted to know the reason, they could only wait until Yang Qingji refined the initial devil aura and woke up. After looking at the situation, the two of them turned around. They couldn't enter the virtual sky world for the time being, but the two of them didn't care. In terms of spiritual aura, the spiritual aura in this underground palace wasn't bad. Moreover, there was still the remnant vermilion bird's breath, which was beneficial to Shi's cultivation. The following days passed very comfortably. Mo Tiange still meditated and cultivated every day. In her spare time, she studied mechanical puppet techniques, while she began to study ancient pill concocting techniques. Previously, they found the pill recipe for the deification pill in the scripture depository. The method of concocting this pill was very different from what it was now, and it even took a different path. Therefore, they could only study it again and slowly explore the ancient pill concocting techniques. The two of them also discussed how they should go in the future. First of all, it was an unchangeable fact that they were trapped in the underground palace. Although Mo Tiange learned the Xuanchu cloud connecting formation from Fu Yaozi, she couldn't use it now. At the very least, she had to figure out a feasible method after she formed her nascent soul. Second, if she wanted to form her nascent soul, she had to prepare a lot of things. The most important thing was to find a safe place. For Mo Tiange, the safest and most suitable place was the virtual sky world. Right now, they were trapped in the underground palace together with Jing Xingji. This secret couldn't be concealed, so they could only wait. Third, since they couldn't immediately enter closed-door meditation to form their nascent souls, they had to make some preparations first. For example, Mo Tiange had Mo Yaoqing's experience in cultivating the art of Sunu and Fu Yaozi's experience in forming his nascent soul using the art of the origin. Both of them needed a long time to understand and analyze. As for medicinal pills and the like, she also needed some time to concoct them. Therefore, the two of them decided that before they found a suitable way to avoid Jing Xingji's eyes and ears, they didn't have to rush into closed-door meditation. They should first make some preparations for forming their nascent souls. When the time came, they could immediately act. Jing Xingji returned from his swordsmanship practice. Seeing that they were busy, he couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing?" The bamboo bed she used to rest on had been put away. A piece of animal skin was spread in the original corner and a praying mat was placed there. In front of him was an exquisite pill furnace, and next to it was a short table filled with all kinds of spiritual panaceas and bottles. She was concentrating on controlling the fire. After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, his Dantian real fire had turned into the vermilion bird's flame. It was very different from the past, and he was still adapting to it. Mo Tiange took some time to raise her head and glance at him. She said casually, "What else can I do? Keep messing around with this broken thing. I'm not talking about this." Seeing that the two of them were so busy that they didn't have time to deal with other people, Jing Xingji shut his mouth. He looked over there. Although it was simple and crude, it had all the necessary tools and was neatly arranged. He then looked over at his own side. There was only a shabby praying mat and scattered sword-nurturing tools all around. Injustice suddenly arose in his heart, and evil rose from his guts. They were both trapped in the underground palace, so why was he, Qin Shoujing, living so comfortably? Just as he was pondering how to make things a little uncomfortable for them, he suddenly saw a golden figure rushing in from the entrance of the hall. Fei Fei ran into the hall and jumped onto Mo Tiange's shoulder. That boy woke up. What? Mo Tiange stopped what she was doing. Fei Fei said with divine comprehension, "That devil cultivator boy woke up." Really? Mo Tiange was pleasantly surprised. How's his situation? You'll know when you go and take a look. Mo Tiange pondered for a while, then pushed the things in her hands away. She looked up and said, "Yang Qingji woke up. Should we go and take a look?" Oh. She was heating up the pill furnace. Upon hearing her words, he stopped. What a coincidence. Exactly. Mo Tiange looked at Jing Xingji. Fellow Daoist Jing, let's go together. Jing Xingji had no choice but to give up the idea he just had. Let's go. 3 people and 1 beast soon arrived at the cave where the primordial devil steel was. The cave still maintained its original appearance. The restrictions at the cave entrance were still there, and Guifang Devil Monarch's corpse was still sitting on the side. Yang Qingji, on the other hand, was already awake. With a dazed expression on his youthful face, he was kneeling next to Guifang Devil Monarch. Fellow Daoist Yang. Mo Tiange called out. After a long time, Yang Qingji finally regained his senses. He raised his head and looked at them with doubt in his eyes. You. His voice was hoarse, and even his reaction became very slow. After a long time, he finally asked, "Why are you also here? Is the passage to the Immortal Palace not closed yet?" He looked dazed, as if he didn't know how much time had passed. Seeing this, Mo Tiange became even more confused. She said, "The passage to the Immortal Palace has been closed. We're trapped in the Immortal Palace." After a long time, Yang Qingji finally nodded slowly. Oh, his dazed appearance was abnormal no matter how one looked at it. Mo Tiange and Shi glanced at each other. Mo Tiange asked tentatively, "Fellow Daoist Yang, are you all right?" Yang Qingji still looked at Guifang Devil Monarch, his eyes flashing with many complicated emotions. In the end, he heaved a long sigh, stood up, and opened the restriction at the cave entrance. "Fellow Daoist Qin, seniors, please come in." His expression was tired, and his gaze was heavy. He didn't have the slightest sharpness of a youth in the past. On the contrary, he seemed a bit disheartened. Facing 2 nascent soul cultivators, he actually opened the restriction without any precaution. No matter how they looked at it, it was abnormal. The 3 people saw it and were astonished. After Yang Qingji opened the restriction, he returned to the side of the primordial devil steel and sat down. His voice was tired. Feel free to ask whatever you want. Chapter 496. All of them were cultivators, so they didn't care about hospitality. The three of them entered the cave and randomly chose a place to sit down. Before entering, Enchanting quickly scanned the cave but didn't find any restrictions. When she turned around, she saw that Enchanting was still in a trance. Not to mention Qin Shi and Jing Xingji, even she could easily kill him. She felt she was being a bit too careful. But there was no harm in being careful. Besides, this matter was so strange that she couldn't be sure this Enchanting was the real Enchanting. After thinking for a while, she said, "Fellow Taoist Yang, what happened to you?" "Your master." Enchanting fiddled with the sky-reaching tower in his hand. His eyes were empty and he didn't look at them. "As you can see, my master has fallen." This matter was right in front of them. They knew it without saying anything, but the inside story obviously wasn't simple. After a moment of silence, Enchanting looked up and smiled. "Fellow Taoist Qin." "Oh, no, I forgot. Qin Wei isn't your real name. I should call you Fellow Taoist Imo now." His gaze lightly swept over Qin Shi and Jing Xingji. There was neither vigilance nor reverence in his eyes. "Are you doubting whether my master really died or not?" They didn't expect Enchanting to say it so straightforwardly. Enchanting said, "If fellow Taoist Yang doesn't mind." Enchanting lowered his head to look at the demonic tower and said to himself, "You don't have to worry. My master has really fallen, and he was killed by me. There's no one here who can threaten you." Enchanting and Qin Shi looked at each other, feeling strange. He was killed by him. He was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, while Guifang Devil Monarch was in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. How could he kill him? Could it be? Enchanting's gaze swept over them, and he showed a somewhat gloomy smile. "It seems you've guessed a little." "Yes, my master intended to take over my body, but he was trapped by primordial devil aura and was killed by my divine comprehension." With this short sentence, his expression was first sad, then determined, and finally calm. This kind of calmness revealed a cold intent that sent chills down people's spines. Whether it was immortal cultivation or demonic cultivation, killing or being killed was no big deal. On this path, even the cleanest person's hands were stained with human lives. Even between master and disciple, there were many who used and schemed against each other, but there were not many who truly had a master-disciple relationship. Nevertheless, Enchanting knew Guifang Devil Monarch regarded Enchanting as his direct disciple. Along the way, he cared for Enchanting in every possible way. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they treated each other like father and son. Unexpectedly, little fellow Taoist, Jing Xingji said coldly, "Your master's cultivation level is at the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Even early and middle stage cultivators like us are far inferior to a nascent soul realm cultivator. How could you kill him?" Jing Xingji was never one to sympathize with others. Even though Enchanting's mood was not right, his questions were still sharp. Enchanting smiled bitterly, but he had no choice but to answer. There were two nascent soul cultivators by his side, and he was only a core formation cultivator. If he didn't have a reasonable explanation, it would be easy for them to kill him. He said faintly, "Senior, you don't know, but Glorious Sky Demon Venerable sealed part of primordial devil aura inside the Heavenly Devil Tower. When Junior recognized Heavenly Devil Tower as its master, I refined this primordial devil aura for my own use. After entering the underground palace, my late master wanted to take this stone tablet away, but he triggered the restrictions inside. He had no choice but to lay a formation to slow down the devil aura and then absorb it. Unfortunately, he underestimated the power of primordial devil aura. Seeing that his body couldn't bear it and I was fine, at the last moment, he wanted to possess me. At this point, he paused and didn't continue speaking immediately. Mo Tiange more or less understood. Since he knew about the existence of the primordial Devil Stone Tablet, Guifang Devil Monarch's plan was to enter the underground palace, seize the primordial Devil Stone Tablet, and use it to enter the deification realm in one go. In the beginning, he didn't have the thought of possessing Mo Tiange. Later, when something happened, he just wanted to take the primordial devil aura for his own use. However, when danger really came, he still attacked his disciple for the sake of his own life. From the perspective of human nature, this was a very natural reaction. His previous concern for Yang Qingji wasn't necessarily fake because it was a fact that he didn't have much time left in his lifespan. With Guifang City around, he definitely needed to find a successor, and Yang Qingji was the successor he chose himself. However, in a critical moment when his life was in danger, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he would want to grasp it. Even if he only had a lifespan of 100 years and it was impossible for him to advance to the deification realm in these 100 years after possessing Mo Tiange's body, the fear of death made him have no time to think about this. It was good enough that he could live for more than 100 years. It was no wonder they saw Guifang Demon Monarch's body maintaining the position of the restriction at the entrance of the cave. He had been fighting against the surging primordial devil aura. In the end, he couldn't resist it anymore and his nascent soul left his body to possess Yang Qingji. Under normal circumstances, I definitely wouldn't be able to resist it, but primordial devil aura was too powerful. His nascent soul was slowly corroded and its power gradually weakened. And because I refined Heavenly Devil Tower, primordial devil aura wouldn't reject me. In the end, his divine consciousness was destroyed by me instead. Yang Qingji looked at them. Seniors, do you have any more questions? He didn't explain it in detail, but he had explained the general situation. The details might involve the secrets of their master-disciple relationship, so he couldn't go into details. According to common sense, it was really inconceivable for a middle-stage core formation cultivator to use his divine consciousness to destroy the nascent soul of a late-stage nascent soul great cultivator. However, there were exceptions to everything. The three of them had experienced the terror of primordial devil aura. If Guifang Demon Monarch's nascent soul was really trapped and corroded by primordial devil aura, it wasn't impossible for it to be devoured. Mo Tiange looked at the other two people. Qin Shi muttered to himself for a while then nodded lightly. Jing Xingji didn't say anything. Mo Tiange had an idea of what was going on based on their reactions. She asked, then, fellow Daoist Yang, what's your next plan? What other plan could I have? Yang Qingji's expression was already calm. He sighed and said, naturally, I'll continue living. He raised his head and looked at the three of them. Fellow Daoist Mo, you said the passage to Immortal Palace is closed. Presumably, we're all trapped in Immortal Palace. Correct. There was nothing to hide. The passage to Immortal Palace has been closed for more than half a year. None of us can get out. Yang Qingji nodded slightly then asked, judging from your expressions, you seem to have a plan. Is there anything I can do? Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange gave Yang Qingji a meaningful look. From their previous dealings, she could see that Yang Qingji rarely interacted with people and lacked calmness when dealing with people. However, from what he said, she could tell that he was actually quick-witted and very smart. Among the three of them, there were two nascent soul cultivators. Although Yang Qingji absorbed primordial devil aura, his cultivation level was only in the core formation realm. In front of them, it was impossible for him to be on equal footing. His words naturally put himself together with them. Not only did he point out that his situation was the same as theirs, but he also expressed his willingness to advance and retreat together with them. It seemed he opened the restriction without any precaution in the beginning, not because he was overly sad but because he wanted to express his attitude. With your current cultivation level, it's still too early to say that, Jing Xingji said bluntly. Since you obtained the great primordial devil technique, you must have a chance to form your nascent soul, right? You know about the great primordial devil technique. After a moment of surprise, Yang Qingji returned to normal. Yes, fellow Daoist Imo obtained Senior Fu Yao Zi's inheritance, so it's not strange that you know about the great primordial devil technique. He paused for a moment then answered, yes, this devil technique is extraordinary. If there are no accidents, forming your nascent soul is inevitable. How much time do you need? This. Yang Qingji pondered for a moment then said, at least 20 to 30 years. That fast? Jing Xingji couldn't believe it. He was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm now. Even if he rushed to the late stage because of this fated chance, reaching the peak stage of the core formation realm and successfully forming his nascent soul in 20 to 30 years was still an incredible speed. For ordinary people, entering closed-door meditation to form their nascent soul would take at least 3 to 5 years to dozens of years. Yang Qingji smiled and said, Senior, you don't know much about devil cultivators, right? We devil cultivators aren't like you Dao cultivators. We rarely encounter bottlenecks and don't have to worry about unstable foundations, so if we cultivate wholeheartedly, we'll advance very quickly. Of course, the drawback is that we'll easily be possessed by the devil and our divine abilities might not be able to keep up. But Junior has the Heavenly Devil Tower and this primordial devil art is very mysterious, so advancing to the nascent soul realm shouldn't be a problem for Junior. Nia Wushang also tried to refine primordial devil aura for dozens of years, but she still couldn't succeed. However, her situation was different from Yang Qingji's. Yang Qingji was basically a devil cultivator, so he refined part of primordial devil aura from the beginning. Nia Wushang, on the other hand, was a martial cultivator and also a Dao cultivator. The devil spirits in her body were intertwined, so it was very troublesome for her to refine primordial devil aura and turn into a devil cultivator. That being the case, Yang Qingji's words were very credible. Yang Qingji's gaze fell on Mo Tiange again. Fellow Daoist Mo, does that mean you really have a way to get out? If I form my nascent soul, will I be qualified to be your companion? Mo Tiange paused and didn't answer directly. Is this fellow Daoist Yang's choice? What else can I do? Yang Qingji smiled bitterly again. Master is dead and the passage to the Immortal Palace is closed. Even if my cultivation level greatly improves, what can I do by myself? No matter how high my cultivation level is or how many treasures I obtain, I still have to get out. Since he spoke so frankly, Mo Tiange felt there was no need to probe further. Seeing that Qin Shi and Jing Xingji didn't have any objections, she said, all right. Since fellow Daoist Yang is so frank, we'll be frank. It's not that we don't have a way to get out, but it's still too early to say. At the very least, both of us have to advance to the nascent soul realm. Otherwise, it'll just be empty talk. Yang Qingji was already mentally prepared for this. He nodded and said, I understand. Next, I'll enter closed-door meditation here until I advance to the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange secretly heaved a sigh of relief when she heard his attitude. She had studied the mysterious void cloud formation. At least 5 mediums were needed, but there were only 4 living people in the Immortal Palace. They still had to find a way to deal with the last one. If Yang Qingji didn't cooperate with them, it would be even more troublesome. But now, Yang Qingji took the initiative to become their companion, so there was one less problem to solve. Chapter 497. The majestic Immortal Palace was snow-white and shrouded in immortal aura, making it look like a fairyland. Unfortunately, this beautiful Immortal Palace lacked a bit of liveliness. It was quiet, deathly still. It had been silent for more than 100,000 years. At the moment when the world changed, it was torn from heaven and earth and became an independent place that no one knew about. For more than 100,000 years, only the scorched black refined corpses occasionally broke the silence in the Immortal Palace. Suddenly, a golden figure flashed across the silence like a bolt of lightning. Left. Following behind the golden figure was a life-sized puppet. Its face and details were carved a bit crudely, but its joints were exquisite and extremely flexible. What was even more peculiar was that this puppet emitted a powerful aura that was comparable to that of a core formation cultivator. This golden figure was a spirit beast with golden fur all over its body. It looked like a leopard cat and had a pair of black eyes that scanned its surroundings cleverly. The puppet obediently went to the left. This was a small medicinal garden. After a long time, most of the restrictions had lost their effectiveness, but some still remained. After being blocked by the restrictions, the puppet raised its hand. The ancient green lamp in its hand emitted light and broke the remaining restrictions with a bang. After that, the puppet and the spirit beast swaggered into the herb garden and plucked the rare spirit herbs that were still in good condition. They either put them into the spirit beast storage space or the cosmos sack hanging on the puppet's body. After that, they left the medicinal garden and continued to search in the Immortal Palace. Mo Tienga poured out a pile of miscellaneous things from the Chenkuan bag. She glanced at them, picked up a few useful things and put the useless ones away. Then, she hung the empty Chenkuan bag back on the puppet's body. Without her command, the puppet stood there obediently and didn't move. She glanced at Fei next to her. After deciding to stay here for a while, it automatically arranged a nest for itself next to the low table. It used the fur of top-grade demonic beasts, padding layer after layer. It was very comfortable. At this moment, Fei was squatting in its nest, slowly combing its golden fur. Sensing her gaze, it glanced back and continued to do its own thing. I say, as a spiritual beast, why doesn't it have any self-awareness? Mo Tienga lightly tapped the table and cast a sidelong glance at it. Fei yawned and lay on the ground lazily. She replied telepathically, if you want me to work, I'll have to pay you for it, right? Mo Tienga eventually shook her head and sighed helplessly upon seeing how it acted as if it was only a matter of course. Forget it, she already knew what kind of character this spiritual beast had. Although it called her master, it had never treated her as a servant. Divine beasts had to have their own pride. It had been 4 years since the passage to the Immortal Parting Palace was closed. The 4 of them had been trapped in the underground palace. Young Qingji had been cultivating in closed-door meditation in the cave where the prime devil steel was located. Jing Xingji had also been diligently cultivating his swordsmanship to improve his cultivation level. As for Mo Tienga and Qin Shi, they had been cultivating day after day, studying the art of engineering and the art of pill concocting. 4 years had passed, and Qin Shi had already grasped the basics of ancient pill concocting techniques. However, deification pills were still far away from him. Not to mention that a few of the spirit herbs were hard to find, since they were pills that could help soul formation cultivators, they would be top-notch even in the entire mortal world. How could it be that easy to make? For this reason, Qin Shi put aside the art of pill concocting for the time being. In any case, he was still far from the deification realm. Even Lord Daoist Jinyang and Lord Daoist Jinghe, who were already in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, would need at least several hundred years to cultivate to the peak stage of the late stage. Mo Tienga, on the other hand, was on the verge of forming her nascent soul and needed a lot of medicinal pills. It was time to start concocting. As for Mo Tienga, she hadn't wasted the past 4 years. First of all, she had memorized Mo Yaoqing's cultivation experience and Fu Yaozi's soul formation experience. She was already prepared for soul formation. As long as the conditions were right, she could enter closed-door meditation at any time. In addition, her biggest progress was the art of engineering. Now, she could make core formation puppets. After recognizing them as masters with her divine sense, she could send them to the underground palace to handle affairs. Seeing that she really made core formation puppets, Jing Xingji was extremely envious. But on second thought, he had nothing to regret. Although Mo Tiange didn't mean to hide it from him, he didn't have the materials to make puppets, nor did he have that many crystal-souled jades to practice with. As for crystal jade, what a joke. How could he be willing to use that kind of treasure to make puppets? Crystal-souled jades weren't enough to make core formation puppets, so he usually used crystals. However, Mo Tiange didn't have many crystals. She only had a dozen or so pieces, which were found in the Qianquan bags of those core formation ancient cultivators when they were adventuring. Therefore, she only made 3 core formation puppets in total. If she wanted to make more, she would have to use crystals. After making core formation puppets, Mo Tiange began to study the jade bone puppet technique while letting Fei Fei take the puppets out of the underground palace to search for treasures left behind in the Immortal Palace. Fei Fei was very clever. In the past few years, it had been out of the underground palace many times, so it had long been familiar with the terrain of the Immortal Palace. It clearly knew where there were refined corpses and restrictions, so it was most suitable to take the puppets to search for treasures. However, Fei Fei's shortcoming was that Fei Fei was too clever. It wasn't an honest Xiaofan that did what it was told. Not only did it often act on its own, but it also kept things to itself. Whenever it saw something it liked, it would put it into its storage space and never take it out. Most high-level spiritual beasts had their own unique storage space, which was usually located in their abdomen, where other people couldn't reach it. If they wanted to take out the things inside, they would have to kill it, cut off its abdomen, and make it into a Qianquan bag. Mo Tiange naturally wouldn't do that. She wasn't a stingy person. There were so many spiritual plants in the virtual sky world, and she let them eat them all, let alone these things. During this time, the core formation puppets and Fei Fei had searched for a lot of good things in the Immortal Palace. Needless to say, except for the special ones that she transplanted into the virtual sky world, the rest went into Fei Fei's pocket. What they did most often was to search for the relics of ancient cultivators in the Immortals' caves left behind. This kind of thing was most suitable for puppets. They weren't afraid of injuries or restrictions, and they carried the prohibition-breaking magic weapons Qin Shi refined to imitate the peak-setting lantern, so they were almost always successful. Nevertheless, the treasures they could obtain were limited. Relics of ancient cultivators were the most common and easiest wealth to obtain in the Immortal Palace. 2 groups of people came to this Immortal Palace. One group was the 5 saints from 100,000 years ago, and the other group was the nascent soul cultivators who came with them. The 5 saints didn't care about them. They spent a lot of time looking for fated chances, so they didn't take many relics of ancient cultivators this time. However, there were many people who came to explore the Immortal Palace 4 years ago. These people weren't like them, who had the inheritance of the 5 saints and knew where the real fated chances were. Once they entered the Immortal Palace, they could only search everywhere. What they searched the most was naturally the Immortals' caves of these ancient cultivators. Most of the relics were taken away by them. As for the deification ancient cultivators' caves, they were 2 obvious targets. Almost all of them were cracked by those nascent soul cultivators, so they naturally didn't leave many treasures behind. However, in any case, the Immortal Palace was an immortal palace. Even if the big fish had been taken away, the remaining small fish and shrimps couldn't be underestimated. After all, the present was different from the past. In the Middle Ages cultivation world, resources were abundant. There were many things that cultivators didn't take seriously at that time, but now, they were rare natural treasures. In this half a year, the combination of the core formation puppet and Fei Fei almost plundered the entire Immortal Palace, accumulating an astonishing amount of wealth for Mo Tiange. After putting everything away, Mo Tiange turned around and found that Qin Shi wasn't cultivating or concocting medicinal pills. Instead, he was staring at the puppet, lost in thought. "What's wrong?" she asked. Qin Shi regained his composure and answered, "I'm thinking about that deification refined corpse." "Is there a problem?" That refined corpse wandered in the Immortal Palace, making it difficult for them to leave the underground palace. However, the gap between their cultivation levels was too big, so they couldn't do anything about it. "If that refined corpse isn't here, we can leave the underground palace. At that time, we'll find an immortal's cave and you can enter closed-door meditation to form your nascent soul." Mo Tiange naturally thought about this matter. If she wanted to enter closed-door meditation, the trouble was that it was inconvenient to hide in the underground palace, and it would be easy for her to expose herself. In addition, she wasn't ready to form her nascent soul yet, so she wasn't in a hurry. Now that the medicinal pills for forming her nascent soul were almost ready, and she also remembered all her experiences, it was indeed time to think about entering closed-door meditation to form her nascent soul. However, that refined corpse's cultivation level was too high, so they really couldn't think of a way to deal with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come up with that trick of letting the puppet out of the underground palace to look for treasures. "That's right, but what can we do? That refined corpse is in the deification realm. If we encounter it, we have no choice but to run." "That's what I was thinking," Qin Shi said slowly, "but I just thought of something that might be feasible." "What is it?" Mo Tiange was shocked. If they could deal with this refined corpse, they could leave the underground palace without any worries, and many things would be easily solved. "I remember you know how to set up a formation to isolate aura, right?" Mo Tiange pondered for a moment. There was indeed such a record in the Xuanji formation book. However, a formation to isolate aura wasn't very useful normally, and it was quite troublesome to set it up. Moreover, the refined corpse's cultivation level was too high, so it wasn't practical to use this formation to trap it. Just as she was about to say something, Qin Shi raised his hand and stopped her. He continued, "First of all, we can try to find out the pattern of this refined corpse's wandering. For example, if we lead it into a sealed valley, will it wander around in the valley? When it chased people, the refined corpse could fly, but when it wandered around, they didn't see it fly." Thinking of this, Mo Tiange's eyes brightened, and she continued to stare at Qin Shi. "If that's really the case, we can lead it into a sealed space, then we can set up a formation to isolate aura around it. Although this formation might not have much effect on deification realm cultivators, it should be able to reduce the range in which it can sense aura, right? As long as we don't get close to that range, we'll be safe." Mo Tiange's eyes became brighter and brighter. Yes, a formation to isolate aura might not be 100% effective on a refined corpse, but it would have some effect. As long as the range wasn't too wide, they could live outside the range with peace of mind. "But, isn't it too dangerous to lure it to a certain place?" "Yes, it's precisely this problem that can't be solved, so I never mentioned it. But it's different now." Qin Shi's gaze fell on the puppets. "You can already make core formation puppets, so we can use them as bait." Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment. "But these puppets don't have aura." "Use illusionary talismans," Qin Shi said, "these talismans aren't difficult to draw. Give me some time, I can draw them." Chapter 498. After learning of their plan, Jing Xingji became excited. Both Mo Tiange and Qin Shi were quiet people. Although being trapped in the underground palace was a bit uncomfortable, it wasn't like they couldn't endure it. Jing Xingji, on the other hand, was different. Aside from meditating and practicing his swordsmanship, what he loved the most was strolling around. Sometimes, he would just stroll around the underground palace, but sometimes, he would take risks and leave the underground palace. Because of the existence of that refined corpse, he had to be very careful every time he left the underground palace. It was very unpleasant. Now that there was a way to trap the refined corpse, he was very proactive. For the sake of this plan, the three of them had made many preparations. Enchanting spent a lot of money and used crystal jades to make many core formation realm puppets. Needless to say, Qin was drawing illusory spiritual talismans every day. As for Jing Xingji, he went everywhere with Fei Fei to look for suitable locations. Fei Fei was very familiar with the Immortal Palace, so she quickly selected a few locations for Jing Xingji to investigate. Obviously, this on-the-spot investigation was the most dangerous part, but it was also the part that didn't require any capital. Jing Xingji muttered a few words, then obediently went. Who asked him to not know how to use mechanisms or draw talismans? Moreover, he was reluctant to part with those crystal jades, so he might as well sell his labor. After several months, they finally decided on a valley. This valley was located at the very edge of the restriction of the Immortal Palace. It occupied a large area, but the spiritual qi was not strong. There were only a few deserted caves scattered around. Jing Xingji went in and explored it. It should be the residence of some low-level cultivators, and there were not too many valuable things. Most importantly, this valley was naturally closed, and there were cliffs on both sides. There was no need to modify it and it could be used. By this time, Enchanting had already made more than 10 puppets, spending a lot of crystal jades on them. These puppets were used to lure the refined corpse, so it was impossible to retrieve them. However, in order to get out of the underground chamber, Zhang Xian couldn't care less about these losses. She had already obtained enough things from the Immortal Palace. Losing some was nothing. Qin's illusionary talisman was rather difficult. He had only begun to learn the art of talisman crafting when he was in the core formation realm. Although he was rather talented, it wasn't that easy to make high-level illusionary talismans. In order to raise the grade of the illusionary talisman, he put down everything and focused on crafting talismans. After wasting a lot of talisman paper and beast blood, when he was almost out of materials, he finally managed to draw enough illusionary spirit talismans for his use. Everything was ready, and the corpse trapping operation finally began. At the exit of the underground palace, Fei Fei poked her head out and looked around. After making sure that there was no danger, she carefully crawled out. Behind him, Jing Xingji muttered, "Are you sure the refined corpse isn't nearby? It would be terrible if this entrance was discovered." Fei Fei raised her head and bit the hem of his sleeve to show her dissatisfaction. Then she turned around and led the way. Enchanting and Qin were next. Although they could control the puppets in the underground palace with their divine senses, it was still better for them to do it themselves. 3 humans and 1 beast had concealment talismans stuck on their bodies. Under Fei Fei's lead, they soon found the refined corpse. The refined corpse was wandering along the mountain path. When it came to a dead end, it would randomly change directions. The 3 of them observed it for a while, but all they saw was that it didn't know how to cross the obstacles. "Have you chosen your route?" Jing Xingji asked. Enchanting nodded, then took out the puppets one by one from her Chenkuan ring. These puppets were lined up in a row, and there were more than 10 of them. Each of them was the size of a real person, and they stood there quietly. Enchanting then took out more than 10 crystal jades from her robe and opened the abdomen of the puppets. There was a small groove inside which a crystal jade could be inserted. Jing Xingji's eyes were filled with envy. So many crystal jades. "You're really willing to?" Enchanting rolled her eyes at him. "I'm not willing to." "Take them out." Jing Xingji immediately shut his mouth. He knew that some time ago, her spiritual beasts and puppets plundered the entire Immortal Palace. He even had a dark suspicion that the 2 of them had planned this beforehand. They only proposed this plan after they plundered all the good things in the Immortal Palace. When the time came, they would deal with the refined corpse, leaving him with some leftovers. However, he only thought about it in his heart. In any case, it was Immortal who had this method. He didn't have a clever spiritual beast, didn't know how to make puppets, and he was even more reluctant to give up crystal jades. He could only accept his bad luck. After the crystal jades were inserted, the more than 10 unconscious puppets suddenly changed and emitted the aura of a core formation cultivator. Immortal said, 5 puppets per person. That won't be a problem, right? To control these puppets, they needed to use their divine sense to set restrictions. The stronger their divine sense was, the more puppets they could control. Although she had the soul refining art, her accuracy wasn't enough to control more than 10 puppets at once. After the 3 of them controlled the puppets, she took out a stack of illusionary talismans and distributed them to each puppet. Controlling the puppets to use the talismans was a bit difficult. Fortunately, their divine senses weren't weak and they'd tried it many times, so it wasn't a big problem. After making all the preparations, Immortal took a deep breath and said, I'll go first. She took a step forward, and with a move of her divine sense, the puppet next to her flew up lightly. The puppet landed next to the refined corpse, but the refined corpse didn't notice it at all. This puppet only had slight spiritual aura fluctuations and didn't have any vitality, so it couldn't attract the refined corpse's attention at all. Immortal controlled the puppet and slowly widened the distance between it and the refined corpse. Jing Xingji took the risk to test this distance. The refined corpse could sense vitality within a radius of several miles. When it was almost there, the puppet moved its fingertips, and an illusionary talisman was ignited. The instantaneous movement attracted the refined corpse's attention. The refined corpse, which had been wandering for several years, finally found a target. It stomped its feet and chased after the puppet. With the fluctuations from the burning illusionary talisman on its body, the puppet quickly fled in the direction of the valley according to its original route. However, the speed of a core formation puppet was limited. It only persisted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before the refined corpse caught up and smashed it into pieces. Upon seeing this, Immortal immediately sent out a summoning talisman. During this time, she had already controlled the puppet to the predetermined location. As soon as he received the summoning talisman, he also let the puppet activate an illusionary talisman and continued to run along the predetermined route. Jing Xingji, on the other hand, had already taken the puppet to the next location. The 3 of them divided the work like this. As soon as they received the summoning talisman, they activated the illusionary talisman and controlled the puppet to run along the predetermined route towards the valley. When it was overtaken, it immediately sent a summoning talisman to the next person and then rushed to the next location. The whole thing wasn't difficult, but it required a high degree of tacit understanding between the 3 people. If there was a slight mistake, the refined corpse might deviate from the predetermined route and mess up the steps. This also required a high level of divine sense from the 3 people. Controlling 5 puppets wasn't a simple matter in itself. They also had to rush to the right location at the right time and activate the illusionary talisman at that moment to try to prolong the time it took for the refined corpse to catch up. Nevertheless, they were well prepared and had experimented several times before. Occasionally, accidents happened, but they managed to pull the refined corpse back to the predetermined route in time. The first puppet, the second puppet. One puppet after another was smashed by the refined corpse, and the distance between the refined corpse and the valley was getting closer and closer. Finally, the last puppet Immortal controlled reached the edge of the valley and jumped down. The refined corpse chased after it and also followed it without any hesitation. When the 3 people and 1 beast met outside the valley, Immortal shouted, "Set up the formation." Feifei immediately turned around and ran while taking out high-grade spirit stones from its storage space. With several popping sounds, it inserted the spirit stones into the formation that had already been set up. Buzz! With a clear sound, several clear lights lit up the surroundings of the valley and shot towards the center. The clear lights converged above the valley and instantly turned into a transparent shield, covering the entire valley. Seeing that the formation was activated, Enchanting breathed a sigh of relief and looked down. With the concealment talisman on them, the refined corpse couldn't sense their existence at this distance, so they could observe the situation without worry. The puppet she controlled was smashed by the refined corpse's claw when it fell into the valley. At this moment, the refined corpse that had lost its target was wandering in the valley. The three people observed it attentively. Although they successfully led the refined corpse into the valley, they still had to see if it really wouldn't fly out of the valley before it could be considered a success. This refined corpse's cultivation level was too high. The formation outside the valley could only isolate part of its aura and make its senses slow, but it couldn't prevent it from leaving the valley or seal its ability to sense aura. An hour later, the refined corpse touched the mountain wall and turned in another direction, showing no intention of flying out of the valley. The three people finally relaxed their tense nerves. This was a deification realm refined corpse. If anything went wrong, they would lose their lives. We're finally safe. Jing-Xingji wiped the sweat from his forehead. Yes, we can move out of the underground palace. Enchanting looked up at the Immortal Palace and sighed. Living outside is much more comfortable than living in the underground palace. After they finished talking, they turned around and saw that Qin-Shi was still observing the valley attentively. What are you doing? Still worried? Jing-Xingji patted his shoulder. Qin-Shi shook his head and didn't answer. Instead, he controlled the remaining puppet to jump down. This puppet didn't activate the illusionary talisman, so the refined corpse turned a blind eye to it. It easily approached the refined corpse. The valley was very deep. Even cultivators couldn't clearly see the scene below, so they could only sense it with their divine senses. Sensing that Qin-Shi was controlling the puppet to touch the refined corpse's right hand, Enchanting suddenly understood. The interspatial ring. This refined corpse was originally a deification realm cultivator, so it naturally had an interspatial ring. After it became a refined corpse, no one dared to approach it, so the interspatial ring was intact on its hand. Almost all the Immortals' caves of the deification realm cultivators in the Immortal Palace had been searched, so this interspatial ring might be the only intact one. Realizing what Qin-Shi was doing, Jing-Xingji became excited. Quick, get that interspatial ring off. Let's divide the loot. Most of the items in the interspatial ring they got from Master Daoist Yuanmu had been taken away, but there were still so many treasures. If it was an intact interspatial ring, how many treasures would it contain? Qin-Shi didn't answer him. He was still focused on controlling the puppet. Finally, the puppet rubbed the interspatial ring off the refined corpse's hand, but at the same time, the refined corpse seemed to feel someone was disturbing it. It waved its arm, and the puppet shattered. The interspatial ring fell into the grass. Qin-Shi heaved a sigh of relief and turned to look at Jing-Xingji. What are you standing there for? Quickly pick it up. Out of the 15 puppets, only one was left under Jing-Xingji's control. Jing-Xingji surprisingly didn't object to his tone. He controlled the last puppet to jump down the valley and pick up the interspatial ring. Chapter 499. After picking up the interspatial ring and making sure the refined corpse wouldn't come out again, the 3 people and 1 beast returned to the underground palace. Sure enough, there were a lot of good things in the interspatial ring. Not to mention the high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades, there were medicinal pills, materials, magic weapons, and so on. After more than 100,000 years, the medicinal pills and spiritual plants had almost lost their spiritual aura and were of no value. Jing Xingji picked some materials related to sword nurturing and gave the rest to Qin Shi and Mo Tiange. The three of them divided the magic weapons equally. Even if they didn't need them, they could sell them for spirit stones. The cultivation technique jade slips could be duplicated, so each of them had one copy. Finally, there were the high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades. Since Jing Xingji gave up most of the materials, he got some more. Finally, there was the interspatial ring. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi already had it, so they gave it to Jing Xingji. Unfortunately, they didn't find the token for the storehouse in the interspatial ring. However, even if they had the token, it would be difficult for them to enter again. The restriction outside the storehouse would automatically repair itself. In the past few years, it had already been restored to its original state. With their cultivation levels, it would be difficult for them to break it. In any case, the interspatial ring was already an amazing wealth. The three of them each got something. Not only did they make up for the corpse trapping operation, but they also made a lot of money. Everyone was happy. Then they put away the things, informed Yang Qingji, and left the underground palace. Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil art, so the most suitable place for cultivation was still the original cave. Therefore, he still did closed-door meditation in the cave and didn't plan to go out. As for Mo Tiange, Qin Shi, and Jing Xingji, after leaving the underground palace, they found abandoned Immortal's caves full of spiritual aura according to the demarcated safe area and settled down separately. There was no shortage of Immortal's caves full of spiritual aura in this Immortal palace. The best ones were naturally those on isolated peaks. These Immortal's caves originally belonged to deification cultivators. Several years ago, when they entered the Immortal Palace, the restrictions on the Immortal's caves were almost cracked by those nascent soul cultivators, and the good things were basically swept away. They didn't have to spend much effort to repair the Immortal's caves and rearrange the restrictions, then they could live there. Out of the 15 core formation puppets they worked hard to make, 14 were destroyed. Mo Tiange was very distressed. Later, she went to find the wreckage and repaired it. Mo Tiange put 2 of them into the virtual sky world to replace the 2 destroyed stone sculpture puppets. As for the other one, it stayed outside to serve tea and handle chores. Mo Tiange ordered the puppets to tidy up the main cultivation room. She was very satisfied when she looked at the neat and tidy Immortal's cave. The cave they chose was located on the highest peak of the Immortal Palace. It was remote and very quiet. Once they left the cave, they could see the entire Immortal Palace. The scenery was extremely beautiful. The only drawback was that the spiritual chi here was slightly lacking, and the cave abode was also slightly smaller. No matter how small the cave abode was, it was still the residence of the sex deity transformation stage elders. It had all the necessary cultivation rooms. It was just that the disciples did not live in a big place. As for the spiritual chi, it was even more unnecessary. How could the spiritual chi in this Immortal Palace be lacking? Besides, once they left the underground palace, Missouri Tiange would enter closed-door meditation to form her nascent soul, so the 2 of them would definitely enter the virtual sky world. What happened outside didn't really matter. After she settled down, she didn't immediately enter closed-door meditation. Forming one's nascent soul wasn't a trivial matter. A little carelessness could lead to irreversible consequences. If she couldn't form her nascent soul when her core shattered, her 100 years of cultivation would go down the drain. Therefore, in addition to Mo Yaoqing and Fu Yaozi's cultivation experiences, Qin Shi also recalled the situation when he formed his nascent soul and carefully summarized some details for reference. As for Mo Tiange, she was comprehending her state of mind. When her state of mind was calm and she was sure there were no mistakes, she would enter closed-door meditation again. A phoenix cry came from outside, followed by the breath of a spiritual beast. Mo Tiange stood up and went out of the cave. She saw Qin Shi feeding a dazzling bird medicinal pills. "Is this your dazzling bird?" The bird in front of her was about 3 feet long. Its whole body was red and bright like flames. Its long tail feathers were extremely gorgeous, very similar to a phoenix's tail. The most peculiar thing was that the bird had 2 eyeballs in each of its eyes, so it was called a dazzling bird. The dazzling bird was a very rare kind of spiritual beast. Not only was it good at using fire magic, but it also had extraordinary strength. Among spiritual beasts of the same rank, it was very powerful. According to ancient records, the dazzling bird had part of the phoenix's bloodline and was a branch of the divine beasts from the distant past era. It also had the effect of warding off evil. Mo Tiange remembered that Qin Shi obtained this dazzling bird when he was still in the foundation building realm and had raised it for 200 years. However, like most cultivators, the spiritual beasts they raised couldn't keep up with their cultivation levels and couldn't help them in fights of magical power, so he rarely brought it with him. When she left, this dazzling bird was only in the 5th rank, but now it was already in the 7th rank. If it advanced again, it would be an 8th rank spiritual beast, which was equivalent to a nascent soul cultivator. Qin Shi fed the last beast spirit pill to the dazzling bird, then patted its head. The dazzling bird let out a cry, spread its wings and flew into the air. He said, "Thanks to the beast spirit pills you left behind, this dazzling bird advanced 2 ranks in more than 50 years. In a few dozen years, it'll probably advance to the 8th rank." Really? Looking at the dazzling bird flying in the air, she was very envious. "It's really strange. Your dazzling bird can smoothly advance from the 5th rank to the 7th rank, but Fei Fei and the others ate so many medicinal pills, but none of them advanced." Qin Shi smiled. Don't you think about how old they are? I've raised this dazzling bird for at least 200 years. Although I'm not as extravagant as you, I still fed it a lot of medicinal pills. How long have Fei Fei and Xiaohua been with you? In my opinion, although spiritual beasts don't have as many bottlenecks as human cultivators, their lifespans are amazing, so they often need to accumulate energy for a long time. Maybe when they advance to the 5th rank, they need to accumulate energy. Look at Xiaofan the sea dragon. It's the oldest, but hasn't it already cultivated to the peak of the 5th rank? I reckon it can advance to the 6th rank soon. Mo Tiange thought about it and agreed. Although Fei Fei and Xiaohua were spiritual beasts she got a long time ago, they had only cultivated for a little more than 100 years. As for Xiaofan, although it hadn't been with her for long, it was already more than 800 years old. It was usually the most well-behaved, unlike Fei Fei and Xiaohua who dared to eat any spiritual plants. But among the 3 spiritual beasts, it cultivated the fastest. Presumably, Qin Shi's words about accumulating energy were somewhat reasonable. By the way, do you still remember the blood-eating vine? Speaking of spiritual beasts, Mo Tiange suddenly remembered this thing. When they first entered the Immortal Palace, they passed by a forest of blood-eating vines. Fu Yaozi said that these things fed on spiritual beasts and were also great supplements for them, so they cut a lot of them and put them in their qiankun bags. Of course I remember. I also plan to use this thing to try to help the dazzling bird advance to the 8th rank. You can also see if these blood-eating vines can help your spiritual beasts break through their bottlenecks. Without hesitation, the 2 of them took out the blood-eating vines they cut and distributed them to their spiritual beasts. When the 4 spiritual beasts saw the blood-eating vines, they were like cats seeing fish. Their reactions were surprisingly similar and they all pounced on them to eat. Mo Tiange was curious and asked Fei Fei, "Is this thing delicious?" Fei Fei nodded vigorously while busily gnawing on it. It had always been very concerned about its image, so there weren't many times when it didn't care about its demeanor. She asked Xiaofan again, "Xiaofan, do you recognize this thing?" Xiaofan was more well-behaved than Fei Fei. Upon hearing her question, it stopped and answered, I don't know, but it smells delicious. I feel comfortable eating it and my spiritual aura circulates very fast. Oh. It seemed this was the intuition of spiritual beasts. The three of you, don't eat too much at once, she warned them and left the virtual sky world. Inside the cave, Qin was sitting in front of a table. Beside him were piles of medicinal pills, magic weapons, and sundries. There were also several Qinkuan bags on the table. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. What are you doing? You took out all your belongings. Qin shook the Qinkuan ring in his hand and said, with this thing, I don't need a Qinkuan bag anymore. They obtained a Qinkuan ring from the deification ancient cultivator in the first cave on the top of ascetic cliff. Later, Master Daoist Yuanmu gave them another Qinkuan ring during the negotiation. Together with the Qinkuan ring in the hands of the deification refined corpse, they had exactly one Qinkuan ring for each of Jing Xingji's group. Qinkuan rings were many times more advanced than Qinkuan bags. In the current cultivation world, the most advanced Qinkuan bags were made from the fur under the belly of high-rank spiritual beasts. High-rank spiritual beasts had a unique storage space with a very large capacity. Ordinary Qinkuan bags, on the other hand, were actually large bags sewn from animal skins and made to look very small using the technique of space. Qinkuan rings were different. They were made using the distant past era space-tearing technique. The space inside was not only large but also independent. It was especially suitable for storing spiritual plants, medicinal pills, and other things that needed to preserve spiritual aura. Qinkuan bags couldn't compare at all. Moreover, even if a restriction was placed on a Qinkuan bag, it was very easy to remove. The Qinkuan ring, on the other hand, was different. A more complicated restriction could be placed on it. If the cultivation level of the person who obtained it wasn't high enough, they couldn't open it. Unless the owner died, the restriction would weaken until it dissipated. Most importantly, how could taking things out of a Qinkuan bag be more convenient than using a Qinkuan ring? For high-rank cultivators like them, taking magic weapons out of a Qinkuan bag would take time no matter how fast they were, and it would be easy for the enemy to see them. Qinkuan rings, on the other hand, didn't need to be worn directly on their fingers. Their spiritual aura could move at will, and they could take out magic weapons unknowingly and catch the enemy off guard. The two of them obtained a lot of things from the Immortal Palace. Because Jing Xingji was beside them, they didn't have time to properly tidy them up. Now that they finally had an independent Immortal's cave, it was a good time to take inventory. Seeing this, Mo Tiange also took out all her things from the Qinkuan bag, tidied them up, and put them into the Qinkuan ring. During this process, she discovered that the Qinkuan bag could actually be directly put into the Qinkuan ring. It was impossible to put a Qinkuan bag into another Qinkuan bag. However, the Qinkuan ring was an independent space, so it could put a Qinkuan bag inside. Such leisurely days passed by for several months. After Qin explained his soul formation experience to Mo Tiange one by one, the two of them tidied up, laid a formation restriction, and prepared to enter closed-door meditation. If there were no accidents, they wouldn't come out of closed-door meditation until Mo Tiange formed her nascent soul. It was unknown how long this process would take, maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years. During this time, with Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji here, someone had to preside over this Immortal's cave outside. As for soul formation, they couldn't be careless. If there was a nascent soul cultivator by their side, it would be a lot safer, so Qin had to enter the virtual sky world. Fortunately, although Fei Fei was a spiritual beast, it was half as smart as a person. With its spiritual intelligence, it wouldn't be a problem to leave the Immortal's cave to it. After a brief discussion, the two of them left the outside matters to Fei Fei and entered the virtual sky world. Chapter 500. The two of them already had experience with entering closed-door meditation in the virtual sky world to form their nascent souls. It had only been 60 to 70 years since the last time Qin advanced to the nascent soul realm, so the preparations this time were very easy. Mo Tiange laid a spirit-gathering formation around the closed-door meditation room. Qin had long finished concocting the medicinal pills she needed. They didn't have any special methods to increase their chances of advancing to the nascent soul realm, but the art of Sunu and Taiyuan record were top-grade cultivation techniques. Coupled with the environment of the distant past era in the virtual sky world and the spiritual pills concocted from 10,000-year-old spiritual plants, their chances of advancing to the nascent soul realm were already very high. Tiange, after you enter closed-door meditation, don't try to form your nascent soul right away. First, carefully recall everyone's soul formation experiences and experience their realms. Once you understand everything, you can circulate your spiritual aura and try to break through to the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange complied one by one. After she finished preparing everything, she entered the closed-door meditation room. She sat cross-legged in the seclusion room and activated the spirit-gathering array. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She still remembered when Qin formed his nascent soul. She once boasted shamelessly about how she had the aptitude that was hard to come by in 1,000 years and the fated chance that was hard to come by in 10,000 years, so why couldn't she become the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the history of the celestial pole? Today, she was merely 160 years old. She was already at the peak of the completion level and was about to break through to the original level. She smiled and stopped sighing in her heart. This sentence was actually just a joke. Although she was confident she could form her nascent soul, she never cared about the time. What was important about forming the nascent soul sooner or later? Ever since she set foot on the path to immortality, she never gave up on herself. Every step she took was steady, which was much more important than becoming the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole. Concealing his spirit and qi, he calmed his mind and easily entered a meditative state. Everything around him was gone. Nothing could be seen, nothing could be heard, nothing could be felt. She felt as if she had returned to her mother's embrace. It was warm, serene, tranquil, until it disappeared. Gradually, even his heart melted in this kind of nothingness. He couldn't find himself, yet he was everywhere. Where am I? She asked herself, but her surroundings were empty, as if even time and space did not exist. This kind of nothingness that didn't even exist was so frightening when she was awake. But at this moment, she was very calm, so calm that she didn't even think about finding out the reason. Because this kind of nothingness made her feel a sense of tranquility and fulfillment that she had never felt before. In the empty void, a speck of light finally appeared. The light grew brighter and brighter, slowly enlarging until she saw people and objects. This was a small village under the jurisdiction of Lianqing in Jin country in the secular world. There were only about 300 to 400 people in total. Everyone had only one surname, so this village was named Mo's village after their surnames. In the vast territory of Jin State, there were countless small villages like this one. They were inconspicuous, but this was the only place that had a different meaning to her. Her lonely and happy childhood, the people she had loved and hated flashed before her eyes one by one. Then came the 10 years of wandering from place to place, suffering all the bullying and injustice. At that time, she always thought that when she succeeded in her cultivation in the future, she would definitely seek revenge on them. She would ruthlessly step on their faces and look at their terrified expressions, and she would feel extremely carefree. However, when he possessed such power, he realized that he no longer cared about all of this. Those bullying and unfairness had made her furious and gnash her teeth. If those people appeared in front of her, she had no doubt that she would kill them with a wave of her hand. But even so, she would not deliberately seek revenge. Because she had a higher goal. In front of this goal, those people who once held grudges in her heart were insignificant. It was as if humans were as insignificant as ants in front of her. This goal was called the path of immortality. In the distant past era, when heaven and earth were first separated, gods came to the world, and demonic spirits appeared. Insignificant humans struggled with birth, aging, illness, and death. They yearned for the power to move mountains and drain seas, just like demonic spirits or even gods. Thus, cultivation came into being. What was cultivation? It was the vain desire of mortals to jump out of samsara, live forever, and conquer the heavens. Millions of years passed. From the vast and boundless primeval times to the chaos of the present day, countless people began to tread the path of immortality. They struggled within the Tao of immortality, but the only ones who managed to escape the cycle of reincarnation and become true immortals were legends. Did the path of immortality really exist? Or was it to say, in the end, they were still a pile of bones that scattered with the wind? A painful expression appeared on Emotienga's face, but she couldn't feel it. Ever since she entered the closed-door meditation room, Qin Shi, who had been guarding outside the door, watched her nervously. Everyone encountered different situations when they tried to form their nascent soul. He didn't know what Emotienga's mental state had experienced, but he knew he couldn't intervene. If she couldn't even pass the initial mental state, there was no need for her to form her nascent soul, she'd already failed. On the path of cultivation, aura refining was the rudiments, foundation building was the threshold, and core formation was the initial success. Only when one formed their nascent soul could they be considered to have truly set foot on the path of immortality and come into contact with the true meaning of immortality. Therefore, to break through to the nascent soul realm, aptitude was no longer that important. Cultivation level, temperament, and personal understanding were more important. Because of this, even those disciples of famous cultivation groups with great cultivators as their backing could only use medicinal pills to reach the core formation realm at most. They couldn't cross the hurdle of forming their nascent soul. Only by comprehending the profound meaning of immortality could one become a true great cultivator. What is the path of immortality? To seek power and not be controlled by others. A woman appeared in Emotienga's mental state and said faintly. She had a dignified appearance and a calm expression. She was just casually standing there, but she was already astonishingly beautiful. She was Mo Yaoqing, born in Danxia sect in Yunzhong 5,000 years ago. She had a pure Yin constitution, and her talent and beauty were equally astonishing. Beauty and pure Yin constitution, these two perfectly combined on her body, causing her a lifetime of misfortune. No one saw the overflowing talent beneath her superior aptitude, and no one saw the firm Tao heart behind her beauty. In order to escape her fate, she crippled her own cultivation level and started from zero. She put in 10 times or even 10 times the effort and hardships of others to enter the nascent soul realm. Emotienga recalled herself. She was once an ignorant child, but because of a sentence she inadvertently said, she was kidnapped. When she was young, a moment of carelessness not only brought disaster to herself, but also implicated innocent people. What is the path of immortality? To seek power and not be controlled by others. What is the path of immortality? To seek longevity and to explore the true meaning of the world. This time, a vague figure appeared. His face couldn't be seen clearly, and his figure couldn't be distinguished. Only his clear and quiet voice could be heard. This was Fu Yaozi, the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong for more than 100,000 years. He was a maverick individual cultivator, a legendary genius cultivator who advanced into the deification realm. In his life, he didn't have many misfortunes, but he was full of ups and downs, and every step he took was extremely difficult. He was considered to have a waste spiritual root, had no wealth, and had no backing. He could only rely on his own 2 legs to advance step by step on the path of immortality. But even so, he never gave up. From an insignificant little aura refining cultivator, he went through countless difficulties and dangers, successfully built his foundation, and entered the threshold of the cultivation world. Later, he obtained an incomplete art of the origin. Relying on his firm Tao heart and intelligence, he advanced step by step on the path of immortality. But after he became a great cultivator, he didn't become arrogant at all. He still diligently explored the path of immortality. What is Tao? What is human? What is heaven and earth? Where does Tao come from? Where does human go? Where is the end of heaven and earth? Can insignificant human beings really have the power to change heaven and earth? And where does the gate of eternal life open? What is the path of immortality? To seek immortality, to explore the true meaning of the world. Countless people and countless things kept appearing in Mo Tianga's mind. Questions, doubts, and eventually calmness. The spiritual aura in the closed-door meditation room gradually stabilized. Outside the closed-door meditation room, She took a deep breath. Finally, she passed the first hurdle. He had failed to form his nascent soul 3 times, and every time, he failed at the first hurdle. This hurdle wasn't too dangerous, but it was a crucial hurdle on the way to the nascent soul realm. Only with a firm belief could she continue walking on the path of immortality. If she hesitated for even a moment, she wouldn't be able to move forward. After an unknown amount of time, Mo Tianga opened her eyes. She felt her heart was as calm as still water, and she took the medicinal pills she prepared one by one. After she took all the medicinal pills, a powerful spiritual aura burst out of her body. She didn't panic and slowly guided the spiritual aura to move in her body. Yin and Yang were Tai Chi, and the combination of the 5 elements was primal chaos. Everything in this world, as long as it was alive, couldn't escape from Yin, Yang, and the 5 elements. Mastering Yin, Yang, and the 5 elements meant mastering the world. She stood motionlessly outside the closed-door meditation room, feeling the fluctuating spiritual aura. This was the second hurdle of soul formation, and it was also the most dangerous hurdle. During this process, the body would absorb countless spiritual auras, and if the meridians and dantian could withstand the test, their gold core would shatter and they would form their nascent soul. If their gold core shattered but couldn't withstand the test, they wouldn't be able to form their nascent soul. In that case, hundreds of years of cultivation would go down the drain. He waited quietly. If an accident happened, he would stop her, protect her gold core, and preserve her cultivation. Nascent soul could be tried again, but once her gold core shattered, everything would be irreparable, and she would have to start all over again. But what made him feel strange was that although everything in the closed-door meditation room was stable and countless spiritual auras were rushing into Mo Tianga's body, the moment her gold core shattered and she would form her nascent soul didn't come. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, time passed quickly, and everything in the closed-door meditation room seemed to have stopped. This made Shi very puzzled, but he couldn't think of anything. During the soul formation process, if other people intervened, it could easily lead to a tragedy. Right now, aside from taking too long, everything was normal for Mo Tianga. If he rashly intervened, he might end up making a fool of himself. After all, when it came to soul formation, everyone had different experiences. His own soul formation process could only be used as a reference. There are also people who take more than 10 years to form their nascent soul. Maybe that's what happened to Mo Tianga. He could only guess like this. Inside the closed-door meditation room, Mo Tianga was already immersed in the cycle of Yin and Yang and the alternation of the 5 elements. She had no idea that someone was restless outside. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, time didn't stop in the slightest. Chapter 501. Misty clouds and immortal chi lingered. Between the towering peaks, sword light flashed from time to time. Sometimes sword chi soared into the sky, and other times sword intent was threatening. This lasted for half a day. In mid-air, in the clouds, Jing Xingji casually withdrew his flying sword. He looked with satisfaction at the brilliant and incomparably sharp flying sword in his hand. This was the ownerless sword that he obtained from an ancient immortal mansion when he built his foundation. Until today, he still did not know what precious material this sword was made of, but after recognizing its master and nourishing it for more than 200 years, the sword was connected with his mind, sharper and sharper, and the sword intent was stronger and stronger. He still remembered that more than 200 years ago, when he obtained this sword, his master, who was still alive, said that this sword was as clear as autumn water, and contained sword chi, so it was better to call it still water sword. In fact, although he seemed to be playing around with the world, he would rather break than bend, and was not suitable for this sword name at all. However, he understood what his master meant. He hoped that he would restrain his edge, so as not to provoke disaster. Unfortunately, at that time he was young and aggressive, and did not understand these things. Later, he had no chance. After the death of his master, he endured for 100 years in the ancient sword sect, but in the end, he could not endure it. The still water sword was called still water, but he had cultivated it into a sword of swift and fierce killing intent. But he did not regret it. What was the use of enduring? In this world, strength was everything. With strength, one could be above others. He did not have the opportunity of Qin Shoujing and Imo Qingwei, but in this immortal palace, he also obtained a lot of good things. Just high-grade spirit stones alone, after 20 years of unscrupulous cultivation, he still had tens of thousands of pieces, which was almost an unimaginable wealth outside. In the world of immortal cultivation, middle-grade and above spirit stones were rare. Even Yuanying stage cultivators, on weekdays, mostly used low-grade or middle-grade spirit stones to trade, and kept high-grade spirit stones for their own use. Ordinary Yuanying stage cultivators, most of their transactions were in the tens of thousands, and their total net worth was only 1 million or so. Tens of thousands of high-grade spirit stones were equivalent to hundreds of millions of low-grade spirit stones. This made him sigh. Ancient times were ancient times, and high-grade spirit stones were not valuable. Unfortunately, although this huge immortal palace was also made of high-grade spirit stones, there were restrictions. Otherwise, he really wanted to move a spirit stone house back. However, although high-grade spirit stones were rare, they could not be compared to crystal jades. He was not proficient in miscellaneous knowledge, so he gave up the materials in exchange for crystal jades. He used the secret method of sword cultivators to refine these crystal jades into the still water sword. After 20 years of nourishment, the still water sword, which was originally filled with killing intent, became even sharper. In his view, it was not inferior to the wind feather sword, the only cultivator of the ancient sword sect at the late Yuan stage, venerable swordsman Yuanying, who was known as the best sword in the world. Thinking of this, he could not help but look towards the northeast. There was also a lone peak there, quietly sitting in the corner of the immortal palace. Speaking of which, it was strange. It had been 20 years. What were Qin Shoujing and Imo Qingwei doing? Unexpectedly, he did not even take a step out of the cave. Even if he went to visit, he would just send his spirit beast to send him away. He knew that after leaving the underground palace, Missouri Qingwei would go into seclusion to form her nascent soul, but even so, it shouldn't be to the extent of not seeing her for 20 years, right? The little devil cultivator in the underground palace had already reached the peak stage of the core formation realm and was planning to enter secluded meditation to form his nascent soul. Besides, she was in seclusion, so why didn't Qin Shoujing go out? When it came to forming one's nascent soul, no one else could help. Could it be that they were having a good time here and forgot to go out? This thought suddenly popped up in Jing Xingji's mind, and then he felt that he was thinking too much. No matter how good this immortal palace was, it was useless if they couldn't get out. They would not be stupid. But why didn't they appear for 20 years? Did Mo Qingwei succeed in forming her nascent soul? With a stomach full of questions, he wanted to go to their cave to have a look, even if he knew that the one who sent him away must be that spirit beast with eyes looking at the sky. After thinking about it for a while, Jing Xingji finally decided to go back to his cave to meditate. No matter what, improving his cultivation was the most practical thing. Turning around in mid-air, he was about to ride his sword back to the cave, when suddenly he stopped and turned his head again to look towards the northeast. "Spiritual light," he blurted out. He saw the cave in the northeast direction suddenly burst into a bright spiritual light, and countless spiritual chi rushed over there, converging into a little spiritual light, surrounding the entire cave. The celestial phenomenon of forming a nascent soul. When the auspicious clouds appeared and spiritual birds flew, Jing Xingji was certain. Joy appeared on his face. It seems that Mo Qingwei succeeded in forming her nascent soul. In this way, there were 3 nascent soul cultivators among them. In addition, Yang Qingji was close to forming his nascent soul, which was one step closer to their plan. But this scene only lasted for less than half an hour before it stopped. There was no sound of wind and thunder, and there was no follow-up celestial phenomenon. When the spiritual light dissipated and everything returned to normal, Jing Xingji was confused again. What was going on? How could the celestial phenomenon of forming a nascent soul only reach this level? It should have lasted at least half a day. Did Mo Qingwei succeed in forming her nascent soul? If she didn't succeed, how could there be a celestial phenomenon? If she succeeded, how could the spiritual light dissipate so quickly? And even the most basic sound of wind and thunder didn't appear. It was said that in ancient times, when a cultivator formed his nascent soul, there would be a minor heavenly tribulation, because the nascent soul cultivator had already obtained the magical power to move mountains and seas and entered the gate of immortality. Today, the minor heavenly tribulation no longer appeared, but the sound of wind and thunder was inevitable. This was the trace left by the minor heavenly tribulation, and it was also a symbol of the cultivator's great success in forming his nascent soul. He was full of doubts, and the flying sword under his feet turned and flew towards the northeast. Mo Tiange opened her eyes. Her whole body felt comfortable and full of power. She gently waved her sleeves, and the spiritual aura around her surged. She stepped out of the closed-door meditation room. At first glance, she saw the person she expected, just like when he formed his nascent soul. Their eyes met. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "Finally." Mo Tiange smiled and naturally put her arms around his waist. He also reached out to hug her. After a long time, the two of them calmed down and walked out of the virtual sky world hand in hand. "What's going on? Why did it take 20 years? Qin," she asked. 20 years. Mo Tiange was surprised. "You said I was in closed-door meditation for 20 years. Yes, if it weren't for the fact that your spiritual aura was very stable, I would have thought you had an accident." Mo Tiange was also puzzled. "I just felt that the spiritual aura was very comfortable, and I didn't feel anything. Later, when my core broke and formed my nascent soul, it was also natural, and I didn't take the initiative to guide it." "Really?" Qin, she pressed her pulse and carefully felt it for a while. "In the end," he said happily, "it seems to be a good thing. The spiritual aura in your whole body is very condensed. It doesn't look like you've just formed your nascent soul at all." Mo Tiange was relieved to hear what he said. Although she felt her nascent soul was very smooth, 20 years was indeed a bit abnormal. After all, she started to form her nascent soul as soon as she entered the closed-door meditation room, unlike some cultivators who cultivated to a certain level before starting to form their nascent souls. The so-called closed-door meditation for dozens of years was actually only a few years. She recalled her experience of forming her nascent soul. She had smoothly passed the first mental trial. After taking the medicinal pill, she had been absorbing spiritual energy. This process wasn't something she had actively controlled, but it had happened naturally. At the last moment, when the conditions were right, her earth core shattered and she became a nascent soul. The process of her core breaking was also very smooth, and she almost didn't feel any pain. Perhaps because her primordial spirit was strong enough and she absorbed enough spiritual aura, she easily absorbed the power after her core broke and formed her nascent soul. Finally, it was the real inner demon trial. It was different from the inner demon trial during core formation. During soul formation, one had to pass the first mental trial before they could enter the step of breaking their core to form their nascent soul. After forming their nascent soul, they still had to pass the real inner demon trial. The mental torture at the beginning tested the cultivator's heart towards Tao and whether they had a firm belief in continuing to advance on the great Tao of the nascent soul realm. As long as there weren't any obvious flaws in their mental state, this trial wasn't difficult. However, the inner demon trial was much more terrifying. Any fears or expectations would appear in this trial. If they couldn't control themselves and got lost in the inner demon, all their efforts would be in vain. Fortunately, all these years, she never relaxed her mental training, so she didn't immerse herself in the inner demon for long. She easily got rid of it. After talking about herself, she began to ask about the outside world in the past 20 years. During these 20 years, Qin had been guarding the virtual sky world. At first, he felt strange and didn't dare to leave. Later, he found her condition stable, so he calmed down and paid attention to her condition while cultivating. After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, he needed to adapt to his body and spiritual aura again. The 3-yang real fire on the 3-yang real fire sword had transformed into the more overbearing vermilion bird's flame. Even the extreme yang real fire had been fused with the vermilion bird's breath. In his dantian, the pure yang spiritual aura and the vermilion bird's breath combined to form a new and powerful force. But because of this, he needed to refine the yang spiritual bead again. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to control the vermilion bird bow that had been absorbed into the yang spiritual bead. After 20 years of refining, he had regained control of the yang spiritual bead. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before he could take out the vermilion bird bow. As for the spiritual beasts and the cave outside, there were no abnormalities. Just as Qin Shi guessed, Xiaofan advanced to the 6th rank in the past 20 years. Xiaowo was also almost there. Although the bright bird didn't advance, its strength also increased greatly. Sure enough, the blood-eating vine had a miraculous effect on spiritual beasts. Feifei, who was left outside the virtual sky world, had also cultivated to the peak of the 5th rank. As for the cave, there weren't many people in this immortal palace, so there wouldn't be any accidents. At most, Jing Xingji would come to harass them. Speaking of Jing Xingji came outside. Qin Shoujing, Mo Qingwei, you should come out of your closed-door meditation now, right? He didn't send them a summoning talisman. Instead, he shouted at the entrance of the cave. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi smiled at each other, then stood up and opened the restriction on the cave. Upon seeing them, Jing Xingji immediately withdrew his flying sword and rushed inside. Did you advance to the nascent soul realm or not? He asked. He quickly scanned Mo Tiange from top to bottom. Upon discovering that she had indeed become a nascent soul cultivator, his expression became strange. Did you pass the inner demon's trial? Are there any problems? Mo Tiange didn't understand why he looked like this. Otherwise, How could I still be standing here? Fellow Daoist Jing, what are you doing? Jing Xingji rubbed his nose and said, I saw the celestial phenomenon of your nascent soul formation outside, but there was no sound of wind or thunder, and the spiritual light dispersed very quickly. I thought you advanced to the nascent soul realm but didn't pass the inner demon's trial. He then muttered to himself, it's strange. Since you advanced to the nascent soul realm smoothly, why is the celestial phenomenon only half complete? Chapter 502. Only half of the nascent soul celestial phenomenon. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi looked at each other with confusion on their faces. Neither of them had thought about the nascent soul celestial phenomenon. Mo Tiange had the experience of forming her gold core in the virtual sky world, and Qin Shi also formed his nascent soul there. The virtual sky world was a closed space that couldn't attract the spiritual aura of heaven and earth, so it was impossible for celestial phenomena to occur inside. As for the outside world, the Immortal Palace was torn open, so it was also a closed space. They also didn't expect celestial phenomena to occur. What happened? Qin Shi asked. Jing Xingji said, you don't know. Just now, there was a spiritual light around your cave, so I knew you should have come out. But the sound of wind and thunder didn't appear, and the spiritual light dispersed. The whole process took less than an hour. It was indeed only an hour since they came out of the virtual sky world. Seeing that the two of them were deep in thought, Jing Xingji couldn't help but ask, what's going on? Tell me. Qin Shi asked, tell me, why did the nascent soul celestial phenomenon appear? Of course it's because of advancing to the nascent soul realm and using one's own strength to trigger the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. Jing Xingji answered halfway and paused, seeming to have understood something. You also realized it, right? Spiritual aura of heaven and earth. How much spiritual aura can there be in a closed space? How could it trigger the nascent soul celestial phenomenon? Jing Xingji was silent, thinking about what Mo Tiange said. It was common knowledge in the cultivation world that celestial phenomena would occur when a cultivator advanced to the gold core realm. It was also known why celestial phenomena were born. When a cultivator advanced to the gold core realm, heaven and earth sensed the cultivator's powerful strength, triggering the fluctuation of spiritual aura and thus celestial phenomena. For cultivators, the so-called spiritual aura of heaven and earth was the spiritual aura existing between heaven and earth. This kind of spiritual aura was different from the spiritual aura produced by spirit veins. It was the original primordial energy existing between heaven and earth. Therefore, even in places without spirit veins, cultivators could still cultivate. This was a problem for an enclosed space. Without spirit veins, there wouldn't be too much spiritual aura. In other words, the spiritual aura of heaven and earth was too little to trigger celestial phenomena. I see. Jing Xingji understood. The spiritual aura of heaven and earth in this immortal palace wasn't enough to trigger the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, so the spiritual light dispersed so quickly. Not only that. Qin Shi said, what I also want to say is, how big is the entire immortal palace? Excluding the spiritual aura produced by the spirit veins and these high-grade spirit stones, how much spiritual aura can there be? Even a half-completed celestial phenomenon ascendant wouldn't be able to withstand it, right? This. Jing Xingji reacted quickly and immediately said, you're saying that this immortal palace isn't sealed. Or should I say, it's not fully enclosed. Qin Shi nodded. You're right. If half of the celestial phenomenon really appeared, it means there's a lot of spiritual aura there. At the very least, it should include the spiritual aura on the spiritual mountain outside. The meaning of these words, Jing Xingji was all too clear. If the barrier between the mystical palace and the mystical mountain was cracked to begin with, it would be much easier for them to destroy the barrier. The entrance that connected Spirited Mountain to the outside world was created by the 5 saints using the space-tearing technique from the Immortal Palace. It was very stable and could be used to exit directly. If I can find the crack in the restriction between the Immortal Palace and the Spirited Mountain, Mo Tiange looked at the delighted Jing Xingji and said, "Fellow Daoist Jing, don't be too happy too early. The restrictions in this Immortal Palace are far beyond our realm. Besides, the Immortal Palace is so big, how could it be easy to find the crack?" Jing Xingji waved his hand indifferently and said, "You're right, but there's more hope than before, isn't there? That's a good thing." "Alright, you're right. If they could really find the crack in the space, the Xuanqiu cloud connecting formation would have a higher chance of success." The 3 of them talked for a while more before Jing Xingji took his leave. The restrictions in the Immortal Palace were so brilliant that finding the crack wasn't something that could be done overnight. Soon after, Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji went back to the underground palace to see Yang Qingji. Yang Qingji was very happy to see her successfully advancing to the nascent soul realm. The 4 of them were now grasshoppers on a rope. Mo Tiange successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, which meant she was 1 step closer to their goal. However, this also urged him to seize the time. Only 3 nascent soul cultivators weren't enough. Using the Xuanqiu cloud connecting formation required 5 mediums. Him advancing to the nascent soul realm was just 1 more, so he had to think of another way. After leaving the underground palace, the 2 of them were about to return to their immortal's cave when Fei, who had been crouching on Mo Tiange's shoulder, said, "Wait, I'll take you to a place." "Ha! What place? Could there be a good place in this Immortal Palace that Fei took a fancy to?" "Just follow me," Fei said, jumped down from Mo Tiange's shoulder, turned around, and ran. The 2 of them glanced at each other then followed. Fei was very sensitive to the aura of spiritual treasures, so it must have found some kind of treasure. After Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil art, the aura of the primordial devil in the Immortal Palace basically disappeared, and the deification refined corpses were trapped in the valley. Now, there were only some refined corpses and demonic beasts with low cultivation levels in this Immortal Palace, so the danger was greatly reduced. Although Fei was a spiritual beast and didn't have any offensive spells, it was very brave. Presumably, in the past 20 years, it had searched every corner of the Immortal Palace. 2 people and 1 beast went further and further away from the buildings of the Immortal Palace, deep into the back mountain. This Immortal Palace occupied a very vast area, even including part of the mountain range. Back then, Fu Yaozi said that the depths of the back mountain was the real interior of the Immortal Palace. From what he saw, it might be the location of the Immortal's cave of the cultivator with the highest cultivation level in this ice palace. However, he and the other 4 people couldn't enter because of time constraints and their low cultivation levels. When she entered the Immortal Palace that year, Mo Tiange didn't think about entering the back mountain. They also didn't have much time, and their divine abilities and wisdom were inferior to the 5 saints, so it would be a waste of time to come. Later, when she was trapped in the Immortal Palace, leaving the Immortal Palace became her biggest goal, so she naturally didn't think about it. Since even Fu Yaozi didn't recommend her to come and explore, it meant that the possibility of her entering was almost 0, so why should she waste time? Besides, she had already obtained great benefits from the Immortal Palace, so being too greedy wasn't a good thing. She followed Fei until they reached a dense forest. She saw Fei darting in and out of the forest, seemingly following some kind of pattern. The more Mo Tiange followed, the more baffled she became. In the end, she suddenly remembered something. "Is this a formation?" Fei stopped and turned to look at her. "Your reaction isn't slow at all." Ignoring its tone, Mo Tiange asked, "What's going on?" "This formation is very clever. I can't see any clues at all." "How did you know how to break it?" "This isn't the way to break it," Fei said. This is the Nine Palaces 8 trigrams formation that was widely spread in the distant past era. This formation doesn't have any lethality, and it's mainly used to prevent others from entering. As long as you understand the footwork, you can enter. This formation is a simplified version of the Nine Palaces 8 trigrams formation. Presumably, many of its mysteries have been lost since the distant past era. I see. She felt strange. Feifei had no interest in formations, so how could it suddenly understand ancient formations? Then, do you know how to break it? Feifei glanced at her. I know how to walk. I don't know how to set it up. As they spoke, their vision suddenly brightened. They were already out of the dense forest. This is. Upon seeing the scene in front of them, both Mo Tiange and Qin Shi were dumbfounded. In front of them was a small valley with luxuriant grass, strange rocks, waterfalls, and clear blue pond water. In terms of scenery, this small valley could be regarded as quiet and elegant. It was an excellent place to stay. However, no matter how beautiful the scenery was, it was nothing in the cultivation world. Their cultivation group's encampment was a celestial mountain, and there were many places with beautiful scenery. However, there was an extremely clever blocking formation outside this small valley, and Feifei was so cautious. Could it be that there was something special about this place? With this thought in mind, the two of them glanced at the scenery in front of them one by one. After looking for a long time, they didn't find anything unusual. The spiritual aura was quite dense, but it was only a little bit denser than the Immortal Palace outside. It was nothing compared to the virtual sky world. There were also some spiritual plants, but they weren't any special species. Moreover, there didn't seem to be any mineral deposits. After looking for a long time, Mo Tiange was still very confused, so she asked directly, Feifei, why did you bring us here? Are there any treasures here? Feifei was squatting by the pond to wash its claws. After it finished washing, it began to comb its golden fur. The treasures are right in front of us. It said lazily. Right in front of us. Qin Shi's eyes moved. He suddenly approached the pond and squatted down. Could it be this water? Feifei rolled on a big rock by the pond. You have a good eye. It was obviously a compliment, but when it came out of its mouth, it felt awkward. However, the two of them were used to it, so they both ignored its tone. Mo Tiange walked closer, scooped up a handful of water, and looked at it carefully for a while. She felt it was no different from ordinary spiritual water, and the spiritual aura inside was very weak, not even comparable to the famous spiritual springs in the celestial pole. As for what was special, it seemed to be very clean, so clean that there were almost no impurities, which was very rare in spiritual springs. This is spirit-tempering water. Feifei didn't let them be confused for too long. It's the cleanest water in the world. It can wash away all impurities. Ah! Mo Tiange was a little surprised. She once wanted to get rid of the remaining devil aura on the Fuxing sword, but she couldn't find a suitable method. Feifei told her there used to be a kind of treasure in this world called spirit-tempering water, which was the nemesis of devil aura. Unfortunately, this thing had long disappeared from the world, and she couldn't find any clues to find it. Later, Fu Yaozi woke up. He wasn't afraid of the devil aura on the Fuxing sword at all, so Mo Tiange didn't worry about it anymore. She didn't expect to see spirit-tempering water here. Whether it's concocting pills or refining tools, adding spirit-tempering water can greatly improve the success rate. If you can refine it into a magic weapon, it'll be even better. This thing is the nemesis of devil aura, so it'll be very easy to deal with devil cultivators. Mo Tiange finally understood. No wonder there was a strange formation outside this valley. It turned out there was such a treasure inside. During the war between the righteous and the devil, this spirit-tempering water showed its effect. Without hesitation, she took out the Fuxing sword from her Qianquan ring and dipped the sword into the pond. With a chi sound, the Fuxing sword emitted a light smoke, and the devil aura attached to the sword dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 503. Without the devil aura, the Fuxing sword was still simple and heavy. Its aura was heavy, but the body of the sword was cold. The power of wind and thunder inside was even more intense, almost breaking out of the sword. She was surprised. This sword has the thunder attribute. The previous Fuxing sword had momentum, but it was hidden. Only after the devil aura was removed did he realize the sword was made of good thunder attribute materials. Treasures of the thunder attribute were not common in the world of cultivators. Firstly, there were very few people with thunder spiritual roots, so it was more suitable for people with gold spiritual roots to practice gold cultivation techniques. Secondly, treasures of the thunder attribute were very powerful. However, because of this, their progress was very slow, so very few people chose them. Mo Tiange didn't expect the Fuxing sword to be a rare thunder attribute magic weapon. Mo Tiange knew about it, but she didn't care because she couldn't remove the devil aura before. After she advanced to the nascent soul realm, she had to refine many magic weapons again to display the strength of a nascent soul cultivator. Now that she removed the devil aura from the Fuxing sword, she obtained a powerful magic weapon. She said happily, Master Fu Yao said this sword isn't his natal magic weapon, but he spent a lot of effort to collect materials to make it. There are pure thunder crystals inside, and if it's used with thunder attribute spells, it'll be very powerful. Oh. In that case, it complements the Great Heavenly Thunder technique. They happened to take a Great Heavenly Thunder technique from the storeroom. The reason why he chose this cultivation technique was because he took into consideration Mo Tiange's lack of Thunderbolt Strike, which could make up for her lack of attack power. The Fuxing sword was also of the lightning attribute, so it just so happened to be of the lightning attribute. Yes. Looking at the new Fuxing sword, Mo Tiange couldn't bear to put it down. After playing with it for a while, she put it away and asked Fei, why is there so much spirit tempering water? Besides, this pool doesn't seem to be stagnant. Is it inexhaustible? Fei said, spirit tempering water needs a lot to be effective. Whether it's concocting pills or refining tools, you need to add a whole bottle, unlike some spiritual waters that only need 1 or 2 drops. As for how this water is produced, just like spirit veins have spiritual eyes, spirit tempering water also has a source. Hearing this, Mo Tiange and Qin looked at each other and asked, what about the source? The source of the spirit tempering water is usually in the shape of jade or stone. It is called the spirit tempering jade or spirit tempering stone. No one knows how they are produced. Bury it somewhere, and the spirit quenching water will be produced slowly. Fei leaped onto her shoulder. Hurry up and let Xiaofan out. Let it look for it. It was so easy to order others around. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange still listened to it. She entered the virtual sky world and took Xiaofan out, letting it go into the water to look for spirit tempering jades or spirit tempering stones. Lil Fan was a sea beast, and it was very agile underwater. Let it find the most suitable one. Not long after they entered the water, Xiaofan floated up from the bottom of the pond with a glowing jade in its mouth. Xiaofan handed it to Mo Tiange and asked, Master, is this it? Mo Tiange took the jade stone. It was about the size of a palm, and there were faint veined patterns on its surface. If she hadn't known about it beforehand, she wouldn't have been able to tell it was a treasure that could produce spirit tempering water. That's it. Fei urged. Put it in the virtual sky world. The 2 people and 2 beasts entered the virtual sky world. Mo Tiange asked the puppets to dig a pond by the stream and buried the spirit tempering jade in it. After thinking for a while, She went out to take some spirit-tempering water from the pond and put it in her Chinkuan ring. Even if they had spirit-tempering jade, it would take some time to produce spirit-tempering water, so they took some as a backup first. After doing all this, Fei Fei led the way. The two of them left the 9 Palaces 8 trigrams formation and went back to the cave. ******, they had spent more than 20 years in this immortal palace, so they couldn't delay the matter of getting out. It wasn't just the two of them who thought so, Jing Xingji also thought so. He had a big grudge, so how could he be willing to be trapped in this immortal palace for the rest of his life? Mo Tiange also had things to do in the outside world. Now that time was tight, they couldn't delay it any longer. Fellow Daoist Qingwei, how long will it take to comprehend your Xuanchu cloud connecting formation? Jing Xingji asked. Mo Tiange pondered for a while. This is hard to say. In my estimation, 1 or 2 years is the shortest, but maybe 3 or 5 years. After all, the Xuanchu cloud connecting formation involved a very complicated space-tearing technique, so it definitely wouldn't take a few years to completely master it. However, they didn't need to pay too much attention to using this formation to open a passage, they just needed to figure out how to use it. 3 or 5 years. Alright, let's count as long as it takes. Jing Xingji thought for a while. To activate the Xuanchu cloud connecting formation, we need 5 nascent soul cultivators or above as mediators, right? Correct. Perhaps we can improve other aspects, but this is the principle of this formation. In fact, it didn't matter what cultivation level the mediators were, but to activate this formation, it needed too much spiritual aura. 5 nascent soul cultivators or above would barely be enough. Jing Xingji said, then here comes the problem. Right now, there are only 4 living people in this immortal palace. The 3 of us are already in the nascent soul realm, and that devil cultivator boy will soon enter closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. He cultivates a top-notch devil technique, so he seems very confident in forming his nascent soul. Let's assume he can successfully form his nascent soul in 3 or 5 years, but that's only 4 nascent soul cultivators. There's still 1 left. What should we do? There are 2 ways, Qin Shi said thoughtfully. The first is to find a nascent soul substitute. The second is to find a crack in the restriction between the immortal palace and the spiritual mountain. Maybe the 4 of us can break the restriction. Mo Tiange agreed. Mo Tiange expressed her approval. Both methods are feasible. The first method was needless to say, it was the safest solution. As for the second method, they only needed to put a puppet in the position of the 5th medium. Breaking the restriction would be done by the 4 of them, but it depended on how big the crack in the restriction was. If it was too small, it would be in vain. Then let's talk about it one by one. The first is to find a nascent soul substitute. In this immortal palace, there are things related to the cultivation realm. Aside from us, there are only spiritual beasts and puppets. Speaking of spiritual beasts, I know your bird is already in the 7th rank, but it won't be easy for it to advance to the 8th rank, right? Qin Shi smiled bitterly. It's not easy for spiritual beasts to advance to the 8th rank. It won't take long even if it takes 100 years to advance from the 7th rank to the 8th rank. It'll take at least 30 to 50 years for my bright bird to advance. 30 to 50 years. Can you wait that long? I can't wait that long. Mo Tiange shook her head decisively. I have something to do outside. If I wait 30 to 50 years, I don't know if I can finish it. Time is tight. I can only wait 20 years at most. We must go out within 20 years. Jing Xingji didn't ask much about the specifics. He said, since spiritual beasts won't work, we can only consider puppets. Fellow Daoist Qingwei, can you make nascent soul puppets now? Mo Tiange shook her head. I can't now, but it's not impossible. She still had the jade bone puppet technique in her hands, and she also had the main materials. However, this technique was very difficult and she still lacked other materials, so she couldn't guarantee she could make it. In other words, this method can only be used as a backup. Mo Tiange nodded to show her agreement. Jing Xingji sighed. Then let's consider the second method. We'll look for the crack in the restriction between the Immortal Palace and the Spiritual Mountain. How confident are you? Mo Tiange and Qin Shi glanced at each other. Their expressions were a bit solemn. After thinking for a while, Qin Shi said, "The Immortal Palace is so big. It won't be easy to find a crack in the restriction that might be very small. Not to mention the restriction is so brilliant that we might not be able to find it with our eyesight. Even if we can find it, I'm afraid it'll take a lot of time." I think so too. Jing Xingji was a bit dejected. Sometimes when I think about it, I feel a bit regretful. Why don't I have any interest in miscellaneous knowledge? If I knew one or two things, I wouldn't be so helpless. Judging from his appearance, he must have thought a lot these days. With his personality, it was already good that he could endure being trapped in the Immortal Palace for more than 20 years. Let's do it this way. Qin Shi said while thinking, neither of these two methods is foolproof, but they both have hope. We'd better do it separately. We have to look for the crack in the Immortal Palace's restriction. Tiange, you should also study it and see if you can make nascent soul puppets. These two methods didn't conflict, so there wouldn't be any problem if they were carried out at the same time. Alright. If we want to get out, there are a few things we have to do. The first is to study the mysterious void cloud connecting formation. The second is to make nascent soul puppets. The third is to find the crack in the Immortal Palace's restriction. If we choose one of the two, we'll have hope of getting out. There's one more thing. Fellow Daoist Yang has to advance to the nascent soul realm smoothly, Jing Xingji added. Otherwise, even if we manage to do it, we still won't be able to get out. Mo Tiange said, primordial devil art isn't an ordinary devil art. Yang Qingji also absorbed a lot of primordial devil aura, so I think it's very likely that he'll succeed in forming his nascent soul. Alright. Jing Xingji no longer doubted her. In any case, we can't interfere with soul formation, so we'll trust him for the time being. It'll take at least 3 to 5 years for fellow Daoist Yang to form his nascent soul. During this time, we can't just sit around and do nothing. Qin Shi brought the topic back. As I said just now, there are 3 things we have to do. The first 2 can only be left to Tiange, but the third. Fellow Daoist Jing, this is our problem. It's not a problem for me to help, Jing Xingji said, the problem is that I'm not proficient in restrictions. I'm afraid I won't be able to find it even if I find it. This isn't a difficult problem, Mo Tiange interrupted. I have a magic weapon here called the sensing bell. It's very sensitive to fluctuations in restrictions. Senior Marshal brother, you can refine another one. The 2 of you can take one with you. Concocting pills and refining tools were Qin Shi's strengths. Since he had the refining method, he could refine it as long as he didn't lack materials. Thus, the 3 of them reached an agreement. Among the 4 people in Immortal Palace, Yang Qingji only needed to focus on his closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. If he successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, it wouldn't be too late for him to join them. Mo Tiange's first task was to study the mysterious cloud-connecting formation. In her spare time, she would see if she could refine nascent soul puppets. Qin Shi first refined the sensing bell, then he and Jing Xingji went to look for cracks in the restrictions around Immortal Palace. With this kind of division of labor, in 3 to 5 years, they would have some progress in leaving Immortal Palace. Having come to a conclusion, Jing Xingji left with satisfaction. Next, they had to take action to leave Immortal Palace. As she watched Jing Xingji's departing figure, Mo Tiange suddenly said, "Say, what if the cracks and the restrictions are near the refined corpses?" Qin Shi was dumbfounded. He didn't know how to answer. Chapter 504. Mo Tiange stood in midair, looking down at the Immortal Palace shrouded in immortal aura. In this independent space, there was no sunrise or sunset, there was only misty white light. Although it was filled with immortal aura and was as beautiful as a fairyland, it was like a dream, unreal and unreal. In the blink of an eye, she had been here for almost 30 years. She couldn't remember the feeling of sunlight anymore. Sometimes she vaguely felt that the mountain breeze, the sea waves, the blue sky, and the bright sunshine were all dreams. If she went on like this, she almost suspected that she would forget the outside world. However, these days were coming to an end soon. She smiled faintly and turned her head. She saw a red light rising from the lonely peak below and approaching her. In the blink of an eye, the red light was already in front of her. "What's wrong?" Qin Shi asked her. Mo Tiange shook her head. "Nothing. Let's go." Seeing that she didn't look worried, Qin Shi didn't ask any more questions. The two of them turned around and flew side by side towards the underground palace. Their speed wasn't fast. Although they had explored every possible place these years, there were still drifting restrictions in this immortal palace. It wouldn't be good if they ran into them. When they arrived at the entrance of the underground palace, they walked along the tunnel until they stopped in front of a cave filled with devil aura. Yang Qingji and Jing Xingji were already inside the cave. The devil aura on Yang Qingji's body was faint, but the spiritual aura pressure was extremely heavy. He had successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm. "You're finally here." Jing Xingji was in high spirits. "I thought you were having fun here and didn't want to leave." Qin Shi glanced at him faintly and said, "Unlike you, I didn't have the chance to have fun even if I wanted to." Seeing that Jing Xingji's face turned green, Mo Tiange said in time, "Fellow Taoists, are you ready?" Being dragged back to the main topic, Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji both answered, "Of course." Mo Tiange looked at Qin Shi. Qin Shi said, "Let's set the formation." She nodded, took out magic weapons, formation flags, spirit stones, and other things from her Qianquan ring, and began to set the formation in the cave. It had been 5 years since she successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm. During these 5 years, everything went smoothly. Yang Qingji went into seclusion to form his nascent soul. When he came out of seclusion on the 3rd year, he successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm and joined their ranks. Her study of the Xuanchu cloud-linking formation was unexpectedly smooth. Perhaps it was because she had advanced to the nascent soul realm, many things that she couldn't understand before were easily solved. By the time Yang Qingji came out of his closed-door meditation, he had already understood the formation. Qin Shi, Jing Xingji, and later, Yang Qingji, the three of them worked together and spent several years before they finally found the crack in the restriction between the Immortal Palace and the Spiritual Mountain. The result was unexpected. The crack was actually where the primordial devil steel was, which was also the cave where Yang Qingji previously performed closed-door meditation. In hindsight, it was only natural. The leakage of primordial devil qi was not only in the Immortal Palace, but also in the Spirited Mountain. There must be a crack in the restriction between the underground palace and the outside world. The only thing that wasn't going well was the jade bone puppet technique. Except for the introductory mechanism book she found in the Qianquan ring of the deification ancient cultivator, Mo Tiange didn't have any other books related to mechanisms, so she could only explore it by herself. However, since the jade bone puppet technique was a treasure in the storehouse, how could it be so easy to figure out? As for the missing materials, she mobilized her 3 spiritual beasts and Qin-Shi's bright bird to search everywhere in the Immortal Palace before she finally managed to gather them. After countless experiments, she finally made some headway. But the so-called deification realm couldn't be reached. For this reason, they spent a lot of effort to enter the scripture depository and obtain some ancient books before they finally succeeded in making this jade bone puppet. However, this puppet couldn't reach the deification realm, it was only in the nascent soul realm. This was something they couldn't do anything about. No matter how talented he was, he couldn't reach the great master realm in just a few years. Moreover, according to the ancient books they found, mechanisms couldn't be used casually. If the cultivator didn't have enough cultivation level, some refining methods couldn't be used, so it was almost impossible for a nascent soul cultivator to make a puppet in the deification realm. After finding this point, Mo Tiange felt relieved. For now, if they wanted to go out, the nascent soul puppet was enough. As for the deification puppet, it wouldn't be too late to refine it again when her cultivation level and attainments in the art of mechanisms were high enough. Young Qingji had already put away the primal devil stone tablet. Mo Tiange used spirit stone powder to draw the embryonic form of the entire cloud link formation in the cave. She then ordered the 3 of them to lay the formation together. The cloud link formation this time was much more complicated than the one they came in with. First of all, they didn't have a holy object with the power of the 5 saints sealed inside, so they needed a lot of spiritual aura. Second, Mo Tiange made some changes to the cloud link formation, so the passage she created should be much safer than when they came in. However, this also increased the complexity of the formation. As the formation flags fell one after another, a complete star atlas gradually appeared on the ground. Finally, she inserted the high-grade spirit stones one by one. The formation suddenly shone with a white light, and the entire star atlas seemed to have come alive. It was like a real starry sky with twinkling stars and vibrant colors. Compared to the one they came in with before, this one was many times more exquisite. Mo Tiange straightened up and heaved a sigh of relief. The cloud link formation was finally laid. "Everyone, stand in your positions," she said. Without needing any instructions, the other 3 people each stood in a corner of the star atlas. Mo Tiange placed the jade bone puppet in the last position. This puppet was made from the crystal skeleton of a deification cultivator who cultivated the Ice Heart Jade Bone technique, the Nephrite Holy Spirit Jade as its skin, and many other rare materials that only appeared in legends. The puppet was lifelike and extremely agile. Mo Tiange even dressed it in Han Ice Palace's uniform. At first glance, it looked no different from a living person. The 4 of them had long understood the incantation to activate the cloud link formation. At this moment, all of their expressions were solemn. They had been trapped in the Immortal Palace for 30 years. Whether they could leave or not depended on this time. The 4 of them, together with the jade bone puppet, began to chant the incantation. The 5 corners under their feet shone brighter and brighter, and the spiritual aura produced by the high-grade spirit stones crazily rushed to where they stood. "Open!" Mo Tiange shouted. Without hesitation, everyone poured their spiritual aura into the star atlas under their feet. This process lasted for a long time. The star atlas was like an insatiable taotai, swallowing their spiritual aura in big gulps. The jade bone puppet couldn't hold on anymore. Mo Tiange pressed her Qiankuan ring, and several crystal jades appeared in her hand. She quickly stuffed them into the puppet's hand. She and Yang Qingji had just advanced to the nascent soul realm, so they didn't have enough spiritual aura. But they were prepared, so they swallowed medicinal pills and used crystal jades to replenish their spiritual aura. Jing Xingji was next. Although he advanced to the nascent soul realm a long time ago, he was a sword cultivator, and this wasn't his specialty. Qin Shi was the only one who wasn't affected. He had refined the Yang spiritual bead all these years. The Yang spiritual bead had endless spiritual aura, so it would automatically replenish his spiritual aura whenever he lacked spiritual aura. Just when Mo Tiange and Yang Qingji almost couldn't hold on any longer, with a buzzing sound, a ray of white light covered the entire star chart. This mysterious cloud-connecting formation, which had absorbed enough spiritual aura, emitted a sparkling light. Then, a dark hole appeared in the center of the star atlas. Success. Upon seeing this hole, Mo Tiange's body went limp and she almost fell to the ground. The spiritual aura in her body had been sucked dry. If she hadn't obtained a lot of crystal jades in the Immortal Palace and had the support of high-quality panaceas, the spiritual aura in her body wouldn't have been enough to activate this formation even if she advanced to the nascent soul realm. Yang Qingji and Jing Xingji weren't much better. Even the jade bone puppet lost its luster. Looking at this dark hole, the four of them looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. 30 years. Almost 30 years. They finally found the way out. The hard work of these 30 years wasn't in vain. Quickly meditate to restore your spiritual aura, Qin Shi reminded them first. We can't say for sure how long this passage can last. Upon hearing this, the other people's expressions became serious. Without delay, they sat down cross-legged to adjust their breaths. If it was before, this kind of situation would absolutely not happen. Not to mention Jing Xingji, Yang Qingji was very vigilant. How could he adjust his breath without any precaution under other people's eyes? But this time, they were trapped in the Immortal Palace together and only found the way out after 30 years. They all felt sympathy for each other after going through trials and tribulations together, and they also trusted each other a little more. Holding the crystal jades, Mo Tiange operated the origin in her dantian with all her strength and quickly recovered her spiritual aura. Then, she replaced the crystal jades that had exhausted their spiritual aura in the jade bone puppet. She put the old ones into her bag and inserted the new ones into the puppet. The puppet immediately regained its momentum. This was the advantage of the puppet. If its spiritual aura was exhausted, it could immediately return to its peak state after replacing the crystal jades. These crystal jades could automatically restore spiritual aura and were inexhaustible. Before long, Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji also recovered their spiritual aura and stood up. Who's going first? Jing Xingji looked at Yang Qingji, then at them. Yang Qingji was about to take a step forward, but Mo Tiange said, "Let the puppet go first." The three of them thought this was a good idea. The puppet could be repaired if it was broken, and it could explore the way in front. Qin Shi said, "Okay, you drive the puppet first." "I'll go with you." Mo Tiange nodded. She took one last look at the cave and didn't waste any more time. She drove the puppet into the cave, then went inside side by side with Jing Xingji. After they went inside, Jing Xingji glanced at Yang Qingji and said, "Fellow Taoist Yang, please go first." His attitude towards Yang Qingji couldn't be said to be contemptuous or warm, but it definitely wasn't as casual as when he faced Yang Qingji and Mo Tiange. Yang Qingji smiled and didn't say anything. He took a step forward and entered the passage. How could he not know what Jing Xingji was thinking? In the end, he was a devil cultivator and came from Yunzhong, so he wasn't on the same path as them. Although they didn't reject him, they also couldn't trust him wholeheartedly. However, after experiencing his master's possession and being trapped in the Immortal Palace for dozens of years, his mentality was much more mature than before, so he didn't care. Jing Xingji waited until Yang Qingji's figure disappeared before he went inside. The figures of the four people disappeared from the cave, and the underground palace returned to silence. After a while, the cave suddenly shook, and the spiritual aura scattered little by little. In the end, the Vermilion Bird Sacrificial Temple, which had its primordial devil aura sucked dry and the vermilion bird bow taken away, suddenly shook and gradually intensified until it finally collapsed into a pile of ruins. This fluctuation was slowly transmitted to the Immortal Palace. The whole Immortal Palace began to shake, and the high-grade spirit stones used to build the Immortal Palace collapsed piece by piece. The lofty Immortal Palace gradually changed beyond recognition. The mountains collapsed and the earth cracked, the sky darkened, and the spiritual aura became chaotic. In the end, it collapsed with a loud bang. The 4 people who entered the passage were completely unaware of all this. Chapter 505. As soon as they came out of the passage, a blazing aura hit them head-on. Enchanting was startled. It's actually here. The exit of the passage opened by the Xuanchu Cloud Passage formation was in the true fire canyon halfway up the mountain that they had passed before. This canyon was deep on the inside and narrow on the outside. There was only a narrow sliver of sky above their heads, and they couldn't see any daylight. The extreme young real fire was burning inside the canyon, which was also the highest grade earthly pole real fire. When they came here, there was indeed a lot of primordial devil aura nearby. It turned out that it was because of the crack between this place and the underground palace. Qin Shi swept his gaze over the scene in front of him. With a wave of his sleeve, a thin red mist-shaped protective shield appeared around the two of them. The extreme young real fire seemed to be afraid of this shield and avoided it. He had been practicing fire attribute cultivation techniques since he was a child, so his real fire was now refined into the vermilion bird flame. The vermilion bird was the essence of Li fire. Its natal real fire was the highest grade real fire in the world, and it also had intelligence. Even the highest grade of the 3 great external fires couldn't compare to it. After a while, young Qingji appeared at the exit of the passage. Seeing the scene outside, he frowned slightly and made a hand seal. Primordial devil aura was released and wrapped around his body. Although this primordial devil aura didn't have the effect of restraining real fire, it was still powerful. With the protection of primordial devil aura, the real fire couldn't do anything to him. The last one to come out was Jing Xingji, who followed Yang Qingji closely. So troublesome, he muttered when he saw the extreme young real fire around him. He waved his sleeves and unsheathed his flying sword, which instantly turned into a fierce sword intent that enveloped his body. Let's go. Jing Xingji felt relaxed after coming out of the Immortal Palace that had trapped him for 30 years. He took a deep breath and couldn't restrain the joy on his face. We're finally out. I was so stifled. He stamped his feet, and a tangible flying sword lifted him up. He was the first one to fly out of the canyon. The extreme young real fire collided with the sword intent released from his body and avoided it. It seemed like a sword cultivator only had one sword, but in fact, once a cultivator reached the core formation realm, it wouldn't be a problem for him to create as many swords as he wanted. When he moved, young Qingji followed closely behind. After that, Qin Shi and Enchanting also flew out of the valley. Under Enchanting's control, the jade bone puppet followed closely behind them. This jade bone puppet was made of a special material. The nephrite holy spiritual jade it was made of was extremely flexible and tough. When it was made, Qin Shi used his vermilion bird's flames to successfully smelt it, so supreme young real fire alone couldn't harm it. It was also wearing the uniform of the Frost Palace. It was unknown what this uniform was made of, but it could be called a top-grade defensive artifact. It was not afraid of the extreme young true fire at all. The 4 of them and the puppet exited the true fire canyon in no time. At this time, Qin Shi suddenly sensed something. He turned around to look and was shocked. Immortal Palace. The other 3 turned their heads and followed his line of sight. Immediately, everyone was stunned. The Immortal Palace that had trapped them for 30 years, the heavily enchanted Immortal Palace slowly collapsed into a pile of rubble in front of them. The collapse of the Immortal Palace caused a strong fluctuation of spiritual chi. The surrounding snowy ground stirred up a snowy mist, blurring the appearance of the Immortal Palace. How could this be? Mo Tiange mumbled to herself. All these years, in order to get out of the Immortal Palace, she had learned the power of the Immortal Palace's restrictions like the back of her hand. How could it collapse just like that? What kind of power could make the Immortal Palace collapse in an instant? Why didn't it collapse earlier or later, but it collapsed right when they came out? Don't think too much. Qin Shi said with a serious expression, the Immortal Palace is destroyed, and the restrictions collapse. It will definitely affect the whole space. Let's go. With his reminder, the others seemed to wake up from a dream. Without any hesitation, they turned into rays of light and flew toward the foot of the Spirit Mountain. At the same time, several rays of light also appeared in several hidden corners of the Spirit Mountain and also flew toward the foot of the mountain. There were actually other cultivators in this Spirit Mountain. This thought flashed in Mo Tiange's mind. Then, she thought about it and understood what was going on. The passage to the Immortal Palace could only last for 3 days, but the passage to this space was different. It only took 1 hour to enter, but one could leave at any time. Some nascent soul cultivators were stuck in a bottleneck all year round. They felt that this place was full of spiritual chi and rich resources, so they might enter closed-door meditation here. However, they were really bold. At that time, many nascent soul cultivators came in, and this place wasn't their territory. It wasn't easy for them to find a safe place to cultivate, not to mention there were also high-level demonic beasts here. The demonic beasts in this space had extremely strong vitality. When the space was torn open, they didn't die out. The environment here was very suitable for cultivation, and there were no natural enemies like humans. After so many years, it wasn't like there weren't any demonic beasts that advanced to the 9th or 10th rank. If they reached the 10th rank, they would be equivalent to late-stage nascent soul cultivators. As soon as those rays of light appeared, the other 3 people also noticed them. Yang Qingji whispered, "It's been so many years. What kind of people are still here?" Jing Xingji, however, noticed the abnormality. His expression was a bit strange. Besides humans, there are also demonic beasts. Hearing this, the others were all stunned. Mo Tiange spread her divine sense and looked as far as her eyes could see. Sure enough, she could faintly sense spiritual aura fluctuations different from those of human cultivators among the rays of light. Demonic beasts above the 8th rank already had spiritual intelligence. Presumably, after discovering the abnormality in this space, these demonic beasts were also running for their lives. This time, the situation was complicated. Human cultivators and demonic beasts were natural enemies. As soon as they saw each other, they wouldn't even need to greet each other, they would definitely try their best to kill each other. Besides, there was only one exit in this space. Even so, the 4 people and 1 puppet still flew with all their might. At the same time, the other rays of light also didn't slow down and rushed madly towards the exit. The first ones they ran into were 2 demonic beasts in the 8th rank and the 9th rank respectively. These 2 demonic beasts had taken human form and had human appearances, but their bodies still retained some demonic beast characteristics. At first glance, it was obvious they were demonic beasts that had taken human form and not humans. This was the first time Mo Tiange saw a demonic beast that had taken human form. Before, she occasionally saw demonic beasts above the 8th rank, but they always appeared in their original forms because their fighting strength was the strongest in their original forms. The 2 demonic beasts that had taken human form, one green and the other white. As soon as they came face to face, the green one opened its mouth and swept its slender, long tongue towards them. Jing Xingji bore the brunt of the attack. His expression turned cold, and his sword intent suddenly soared. Hundreds of sword lights appeared around his body and slashed towards the green demonic beast's long tongue. Sensing the sharpness of the sword aura, the green demonic beast hastily retreated. The white demonic beast stepped forward and spread its arms. Lightning flashed in its palms, and a huge pillar of lightning appeared between its hands, striking towards everyone. It was a rarely seen thunder attribute demonic beast. Qin Shi wrinkled his brows. The three-yang real fire sword suddenly appeared and turned into a red ocean, meeting the attack head-on. When the vermilion bird's flames and the lightning met, sizzling sounds rang out incessantly. At first, the white demonic beast still had a sneer on its face, but after a while, its expression changed greatly. The vermilion bird's flames slowly swallowed its lightning. "Wait!" A strange voice rang in their ears. The white demonic beast said, "Who are you? Why do you have the vermilion bird's breath on your bodies?" Although it spoke the human language, its intonation was extremely strange. In the distant past era, what human cultivators called demonic beasts were also spiritual beasts, but their bloodlines weren't as noble as real spirits. The vermilion bird belonged to the 5 spirits and was one of the noblest divine beasts. Any beast that cultivated couldn't ignore it. Qin Shi didn't stop, but he also didn't press forward. He said, "What does this have to do with you? Since you've already taken human form, you're no less intelligent than humans. You attacked me as soon as you saw me, what else is there to say?" The 2 human-shaped demonic beasts looked at each other. The white one turned to look at the collapsed Immortal Palace and said, "Since you have the vermilion bird's breath on your body, you can also be considered related to us beast cultivators. We can't keep this space, so it's better for us to stop and run for our lives." If these 2 demonic beasts hadn't attacked each other as soon as they saw each other, they wouldn't have wanted to fight to the death in this situation. They were trapped in the Immortal Palace for 30 years and finally escaped with great difficulty. Now that the space was about to collapse, they didn't even have time to save their lives. Fight to the death. They weren't stupid. Seeing that these 2 human-shaped demonic beasts seemed to be quite sincere, Qin Shi's expression slowly relaxed. He shook his hand and withdrew the 3-yang real fire sword. At that moment, 2 more flight lights approached them. A human cultivator's voice came from one of them. "Fellow Taoists, please lend us a hand." It was actually a stout middle-stage nascent soul cultivator with a 9th-rank demonic beast chasing after him. Although cultivators fought endlessly, they had a different attitude when facing demonic beasts. They didn't hesitate. Jing Xingji brandished his sword aura and shot it towards the beast cultivator behind this person. Yang Qingji also flew up and his primordial devil aura suddenly exploded. Upon seeing this, the blue and white demonic beasts hastily flew forward and blocked the 2 people's attacks for the demonic beast chasing after them. The white demonic beast shouted, "All of you, stop." Taking advantage of this obstruction, the stout cultivator landed between Mo Tiange and the others. He hurriedly cupped his hands towards them and said, "Fellow Taoists, thank you for your help." Upon seeing this person, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi's gazes met. They were a bit surprised. They knew this person. He was the Danxia sect cultivator they met when they first entered the space, Nanguatian. At that time, this person fought with others over a withered vine full of wood spirit's spiritual aura. After they entered the Immortal Palace, they never saw him again. They didn't expect he'd actually stayed on Mount Lingshan for so long. The one chasing after Nanguatian was a pitch-black 2-winged demonic beast. Upon hearing the white demonic beast's shout, it vigilantly looked at the human cultivators who obviously outnumbered them. It also transformed into a dark and thin man and landed. "Old White, what are you doing? It also spoke the human language with a strange tone. The white demonic beast said, we've made an agreement with these humans. Escaping is more important, so we won't fight. It then added in a low voice, they outnumber us, so we can't defeat them. The black demonic beast swept its gaze over them. 5 people and a puppet were all above the nascent soul realm. Among them, 2 were in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, which was equivalent to the 9th rank of its beast cultivators. All right. The black demonic beast didn't insist. We're done here. Let's go out and talk. Upon seeing its agreement, the white demonic beast heaved a sigh of relief. It turned towards Qin Shi and said, Vermilion Bird Cultivator, we won't take the initiative to attack you again. We hope you won't attack us either. Qin Shi answered, as long as you don't attack us, we won't go back on our word. All right then. For the sake of your vermilion bird's breath, we believe you. Once the white demonic beast finished speaking, it called out to its 2 companions, let's go. Right after it finished speaking, the 3 demonic beasts turned into flight lights and continued to fly towards the exit. Let's go too. The collapse of the restrictions was becoming more and more violent. They couldn't stay here for long. Everyone also turned into flight lights and flew towards the foot of the mountain. Chapter 506. At the exit of the space, the 3 demonic beasts in human form disappeared. The 5 of them followed them without hesitation. With a flash of white light, they left the space. When the white light dissipated, they found themselves standing on the island they came from. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. The collapse of a restriction in an independent space was no joke. Perhaps even the entire space would be destroyed because of it. At that time, everything inside would disappear along with the space, including the people inside. Fortunately, they came out in time and escaped the disaster. The sound of the waves whistled in her ears and the moist smell of the sea, which she hadn't smelled for a long time. She was touched and took a deep breath. Finally, she was back in this world. Jing Xingji looked up at the sky and muttered, what a coincidence. We ran into this kind of weather as soon as we came out. Around the island, the waves were monstrous and the sky was covered in dark clouds. Lightning flashed silently from time to time as if a heavy rain was about to fall. This was the kind of thunderstorm that people living by the sea feared the most. Nan Guitian, who came out with them, looked at the sky and muttered, this is bad. The wind and waves in the returning ruined sea are much more terrifying than in other places. Mo Tiange turned around and asked, this. Fellow Daoist Nan, may I know what's terrifying about the wind and waves in the returning ruined sea? Nan Guitian looked at her with amazement in his eyes. So it's. Fellow Daoist Mo. Back then, everyone said you and your wife died in the Immortal Palace. I didn't expect fellow Daoist Mo to have other fated chances and form her nascent soul. Congratulations. They didn't leave the Immortal Palace before the passage disappeared, so the others naturally thought they died inside. Mo Tiange smiled and said, fellow Daoist Nan, you're too polite. You're the one who's really surprising. You actually didn't come out after so many years. Nan Guitian sighed and said, there's nothing I can do about it. After sighing, he explained with a smile, fellow Daoist Mo isn't from Yunzhong, so you probably don't know much about the returning ruined sea. The returning ruined sea is different from the Eastern Sea and the Northern Sea. In the other seas, if you don't go deep into the sea, you won't encounter any danger. But in the returning ruined sea, there are high-level sea beasts everywhere. If there's a storm, the gales and waves are extremely powerful. Even cultivators can easily die if they don't have enough cultivation. Really? Mo Tiange looked up and saw several flashes of lightning flashing in the sky. Although there was no sound of thunder, it seemed like a storm was coming. The returning ruined sea might be dangerous, but we're all nascent soul cultivators, so there's no need to be nervous. Yang Qingji said, moreover, this place isn't very far from One Leaf Island. If we fly at full speed, we'll arrive in half a day. One Leaf Island has a defensive array formation. A mere storm is nothing. This fellow Taoist's words make sense. A look of surprise appeared on Nan Guotian's face when he saw Yang Qingji, but a smile soon appeared on his face. What do you guys plan to do? Should I hide here, or should I return to One Leaf Island now? What are your plans, fellow Taoist Nan? Nan Guotian glanced at the three shape-shifted demon beasts that had come out earlier than them. They seemed to be hesitating about where to go and would occasionally look at them warily. The three of them had lived in the torn space for who knew how many years. They probably knew nothing about the outside world and didn't know what to do. In my opinion, it's better for us to move together, Nan Guotian said. Everyone understood what he meant. There were demon cultivators nearby. If they split up, who knew if those demon cultivators would attack them? Demon cultivators and human cultivators were natural enemies. Before they could make up their minds, they suddenly heard a sudden clap of thunder. A bolt of lightning struck the sea not far away from them, creating huge waves that were more than 100 feet tall. This clap of thunder was like a signal. Immediately after, lightning struck down one after another, landing on the surface of the sea around the small island. What a strong thunder element aura! Jing Xingji's expression changed slightly. No wonder low-level cultivators call the returning ruined sea the Sea of No Return. This kind of power isn't inferior to the thunder element spells of us nascent soul cultivators. Yang Qingji frowned and said in a low voice, strange. Upon seeing his strange expression, Mo Tiange asked, what's strange about fellow Taoist Yang? The one who answered was Nan Guotian. His expression was the same as Yang Qingji's, he was a bit puzzled. Although the wind and waves in the returning ruined sea are terrifying, such powerful thunder and lightning are rarely seen. Moreover, they're so frequent. Before they could get an answer, the three shape-shifting demon cultivators nearby suddenly separated. No one knew what they were going to do. Although they didn't attack, everyone had been secretly watching them. As soon as they saw something was wrong, they immediately took out their magic weapons. In the next moment, however, they heard the white demonic beast shout, Heavenly Tribulation. Heavenly Tribulation. He rolled up his sleeves and released the vermilion bird protective barrier. He said, it's the heavenly tribulation of the demonic beast's shape-shifting. Previously, the space was independent, so heaven and earth couldn't sense them when they shape-shifted. Now, as soon as they left the space, the heavenly tribulation came. His explanation was simple, but everyone present was a nascent soul cultivator, so they understood after a bit of thinking. Demonic beasts could gain spiritual intelligence after advancing to the 8th rank and could also shape-shift into humans. Before shape-shifting, demonic beasts were just demonic beasts, but after shape-shifting, they could be called demon cultivators. Whether it was in terms of intelligence or strength, demonic beasts were inferior to human cultivators. However, once they became demon cultivators, they would have enough intelligence to use magic weapons. Coupled with their tough bodies, they could stand shoulder to shoulder with human cultivators. Shape-shifting was very important to demonic beasts. Transforming from a beast to a human was considered a heaven-defying act. Therefore, heaven and earth would send down heavenly tribulation when it sensed demonic beasts shape-shifting. Only by going through heavenly tribulation could they successfully shape-shift and become demon cultivators. These three demonic beasts could be considered lucky. They had been inside the torn space, so heaven and earth couldn't sense them. Naturally, there was no heavenly tribulation, and they shape-shifted smoothly. This was the same principle as when Mo Tiange and Yang Qingji formed their nascent souls without any celestial phenomena. Now that they came out, heaven and earth sensed them and sent down heavenly tribulation. Everyone's expression changed. Heavenly tribulation. Although they hadn't experienced heavenly tribulation before, they weren't low-level cultivators who hadn't experienced it. They knew how terrifying heavenly tribulation was. Moreover, there were 3 shape-shifting demonic beasts here. Didn't that mean there would be 3 heavenly tribulations? Let's go! Nan Guitian was the first to shout. He threw out a jade crane, which materialized and carried him into the distance. Once he moved, Mo Tiange and the others followed him without hesitation. Heavenly tribulation didn't recognize people. If they stayed within its range, it would strike them as well. The sound of thunder grew louder and louder. Lightning continuously tore through the dark sky. Dark clouds covered the sky, and piercingly cold gales blew in the surroundings. The waves rose higher and higher, and the sea revealed its ferocious claws. Boom! Another bolt of lightning struck and exploded not far away from them. The waves surged and almost threw them off their flying magic weapons. This kind of power definitely wasn't ordinary wind and lightning. It was undoubtedly heavenly lightning. The heavenly tribulation had already begun. Upon realizing this, everyone steered their flying magic weapons and fled at full speed. The heavenly lightning that descended from the heavenly tribulation would slowly become stronger as time passed. This was only the beginning. Hopefully, they could escape the range of the heavenly tribulation before its power increased. However, after flying for a while, the heavenly lightning didn't disappear. Instead, it became stronger and stronger. Mo Tiange found it strange. They were already quite a distance away from the 3 shape-shifted demon cultivators. The heavenly tribulation shouldn't be that wide, right? Moreover, the heavenly tribulation descended as soon as the 3 shape-shifted demon cultivators left the space. Shouldn't her and Yang Qingji's nascent soul formation phenomena appear soon? While flying, she looked up and saw a thick pillar of lightning coming down from above. Boom! The pillar of lightning landed right next to her, and the resulting airwave almost caused everyone to fall. Something wasn't right. Her intuition told her that something was wrong. When the second lightning pillar fell, Jing Xingji suddenly stopped and said, "Something's wrong. This isn't a shape-shifting heavenly tribulation." "What?" Nan Guitian asked. Jing Xingji's gaze fell on Mo Tiange, and he looked unprecedentedly frightened. "This is a nascent soul formation heavenly tribulation." On One Leaf Island, the wind howled and lightning flashed incessantly. The scariest storm in the Sea of Returning Ruins was about to arrive. According to usual practice, when such weather appeared, all cultivators would stop hunting sea beasts and return to One Leaf Island's market square. The market square's defensive formation would then be fully activated to defend against the storm and prevent damage. One Leaf Island's defensive formation was no small matter. In order to defend against the sea beasts and the ever-changing, terrifying weather in the Sea of Returning Ruins, the most brilliant formation masters in Yunzhong set up layer upon layer of restrictions around the island. They were also perfected by successive generations of formation masters, so it could be said to be the best in Yunzhong. With this defensive formation, for tens of thousands of years, no matter how terrifying the weather was, One Leaf Island had always been safe and sound. Therefore, even though the storm was terrifying, the cultivators who had already returned to One Leaf Island were very relaxed. They took advantage of this rare opportunity to trade with each other or gather in tea houses to exchange gossip. At that moment, several flight lights flew into the air and stopped below the defensive barrier. The cultivators who noticed this were extremely surprised. It should be known that places like markets had restrictions that prohibited flying, and only high-level cultivators could break through such restrictions. One-Leaf Island's restrictions were of the highest level in Yunzhong. Only nascent soul cultivators could not be restricted by the restrictions when the formation was fully activated. The scene in front of them was clearly a gathering of several nascent soul cultivators in the air. Did something happen? Daoist Rui, what's going on? The fat cultivator who had just flown up bowed to the crowd and asked the young Daoist priest who was the closest to him. This young Daoist priest at the mid-nascent soul stage was Daoist Rui, who had the highest cultivation level in 5 Elements Valley. He frowned slightly and stared at one place, then shook his head gently. I don't know yet. After a pause, he said, it's not normal for so many lightning bolts to suddenly appear. Yes, with such power, even we nascent soul cultivators would find it difficult to escape unscathed, right? Someone else followed up. Several nascent soul cultivators looked at the flashing lightning bolts where the sea and the sky met, frowning deeply. They all knew that this was unusual, but the wind and lightning looked extraordinarily powerful. If they went out to investigate, it would be a little risky. It's actually a heavenly tribulation. Interesting. While everyone was silent, a voice suddenly came from behind. They turned to look and saw a skinny old man standing behind them with a smile. Seeing this person, everyone was shocked. So it's Daoist Ma. Daoist Rui hurriedly bowed. This old man wore a wrinkled dark blue Daoist robe, carried a gourd on his back, and held a whip in his hand. He was the late nascent soul itinerant cultivator, Old Donkey Ma. However, probably because he was in the market, he did not have his donkey with him. Old Donkey Ma smiled until his wrinkles overlapped. He bowed to the crowd in return. After the greetings, Daoist Rui asked impatiently, Daoist Ma, you said that this is a heavenly tribulation. That's right. In the past, I was fortunate enough to encounter a transformed demonic beast in the depths of Return Ruined Sea and witnessed a heavenly tribulation. This is a transformation heavenly tribulation? A cultivator was extremely shocked. There's actually a demonic beast that transformed so close to One-Leaf Island. Isn't it afraid of us human cultivators? Old Donkey Ma stroked his sparse beard and flew to the front of the crowd. He looked at the increasingly dense heavenly tribulation in the distance, and his expression slowly became extremely shocked. Ha! There's actually more than one heavenly tribulation. What? Old Donkey Ma did not answer. He looked at the turbulent sea surface and slowly smiled in surprise. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there's also that side, it can be considered half. This is really interesting. When did heavenly tribulations become so cheap? There are actually 4 half-heaven tribulations gathered together. Chapter 507. This was going to be interesting. Old Donkey Ma's cultivation wasn't the highest, but he was undoubtedly the most knowledgeable person in Yunzhong. He had seen all sorts of strange things. Old Donkey Ma had seen all sorts of strange things. However, he was sure that this was the first time he had seen something like this in tens of thousands of years. Heavenly tribulations were extremely rare. Even nascent soul realm cultivators rarely saw one. It was said that in ancient times, when cultivators advanced to nascent soul, minor heavenly tribulations would descend. However, there were no more heavenly tribulations for cultivators now. All that was left was the sound of wind and thunder. No one knew the reason. However, many people believed that nascent soul cultivators were far weaker than ancient cultivators and did not meet the requirements to trigger heavenly tribulations. Hence, there were no more heavenly tribulations. There were only 2 situations in which heavenly tribulations would appear. One was when a demon beast transformed and became a demon cultivator. The other was when a cultivator transformed and became a peak existence in the human world. Demon beasts that could transform usually lived deep in the sea or deep in the mountains. Ordinary cultivators could not see them at all. Even if they did, it would not be so coincidental that they happened to be in the middle of a heavenly tribulation. Only nascent soul cultivators like old Donkey Ma, who had traveled all over Yunzhong and had good luck, had seen heavenly tribulations. Good luck was because although heavenly tribulations were terrifying, demon beasts that had just gone through heavenly tribulations were very weak. It was a good time to take advantage of them. Whether it was taking them in as spirit beasts or killing them for their inner cores and corpses, there were great benefits. Old Donkey Ma's 8th grade spirit beast might have come this way. However, not only did they see heavenly tribulations on One Leaf Island, but there were 4.5 of them. This was much more absurd than the novels of mortals. If the truth was not right in front of them, they would not believe it. Fellow Taoist Ma, are you kidding us? Faced with doubt, old Donkey Ma lifted his eyelids. I'm just saying. Whether you believe it or not, it's none of my business. His attitude of a believe it or not made it hard for the others to say anything else. Only Taoist Rui asked seriously, fellow Taoist Ma, for heavenly tribulations is fine. What's with half of them? This old man also doesn't know. Old Donkey Ma was also puzzled. He raised his whip and pointed at 4 spots on the surface of the sea. Taoist Rui, please take a look. These 4 lightning pillars are very thick, and their might can be imagined. They must be the center of the heavenly tribulation. However, the lightning pillars on this side are slightly weaker than the other 4, but they are much stronger than the heavenly thunder at the periphery. That's why this old man said that these are 4 half-heavenly tribulations. Everyone took a closer look and found that it was indeed so. Someone immediately thought, fellow Taoists, no matter what's going on, there must be a demonic beast undergoing the form transformation tribulation. Isn't this a good opportunity for us? That's right. The others were tempted to make a move. Nascent soul cultivators like them were not like low-grade cultivators who could afford medicinal pills and top-grade treasures as long as they had money. In the nascent soul realm, treasures of heaven and earth were all helpful to cultivation. In the current world, treasures of heaven and earth were very rare. Not to mention whether they still existed, even if they did, the nascent soul cultivators who found them would keep them for themselves. Very few would trade them. But now, there were actually several demonic beasts undergoing heavenly tribulations in the vicinity of One Leaf Island. If they succeeded, they would become 8th grade demonic beasts. The inner cores of 8th grade demonic beasts could be used to refine medicinal pills for nascent soul cultivators, and their corpses could be used to refine top-grade Dharma treasures. It was very difficult for them to find an 8th grade demonic beast on a normal day. Ha! Although old Donkey Ma wore a smile on his face, his tone was somewhat disapproving. He said slowly, fellow Taoists, don't think too simply. 1 heavenly tribulation is fine, but 4 half-heavenly tribulations are so close to our One Leaf Island. Heh, I'm afraid the One Leaf Island's defensive array formation will also be impacted. It can't be, right? When it came to array formations, Taoist Rui was somewhat doubtful. Fellow Taoist Ma, the array formations and restrictions of One Leaf Island have been continuously perfected and repaired by generations of array formation masters. They are not inferior to the mountain guarding arrays of large sections. There have been no accidents in the past tens of thousands of years. In these tens of thousands of years, has there ever been a situation where 4 half-heavenly tribulations appeared at the same time? Old Donkey Ma said slowly, his tone becoming more and more solemn. This heavenly tribulation has only just begun. As time passes, its range will become wider and its power will also increase. Whether One Leaf Island will be able to survive, is hard to say. On One Leaf Island, the nascent soul cultivators discussed one after another, guessing the truth of the matter. Meanwhile, on the sea near the island, countless heavenly thunder turned the surrounding sea into a battlefield of azuras. Dark clouds surged in the sky, lightning flashed incessantly, and piercingly cold astral winds howled. Thick lightning pillars fell from the sky incessantly, and the rumbling sounds did not stop. The sea beasts living nearby were in deep trouble. Under such heavenly thunder, there was no possibility of them surviving at all. For a time, countless sea beast carcasses floated to the surface of the sea, and their blood dyed the seawater red. Nanguitian made a hand seal in a sorry state. Braving the astral winds and heavenly thunder, he once again took out his defensive Dharma treasure. He regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. 30 years ago, he saw that the Dawning Pill sect was declining day by day. He had been stuck at the mid-stage nascent soul formation realm for several hundred years without being able to make a breakthrough, and he could not find any outstanding talents in the sect. In desperation, he hid in a secret place in the returning ruined sea and went into seclusion, hoping to use the rich spirit chi and rich resources of the primordial land to break through to the late-stage nascent soul stage in one go and restore the Dawning Pill sect to its former glory. Over the past 30 years, he had taken great risks. He had to be wary of cultivators who had the same idea as him, and he also had to be wary of the high-level demon beasts that lived in the space. He had been on tenterhooks, and every step he took was difficult. Fortunately, his efforts had paid off. The bottleneck that he had been stuck at for a long time finally showed signs of loosening. At this critical moment, the Immortal Palace suddenly collapsed. Seeing that the space was about to be destroyed, he had no choice but to leave the space and escape. The shape-shifting demon cultivator that had been chasing after him had been watching him for a long time. However, he had been cautious and had set up layers of restrictions in his temporary cave abode, so the demon cultivator could not do anything to him. When the Immortal Palace collapsed, the demon cultivator had wanted to kill him in one fell swoop so that it could obtain his nascent soul to aid its own cultivation. Nanguitian knew that there were still a few demon cultivators in the space, so he could not afford to get entangled with them. Thus, he immediately asked for help when he saw that there were others in the space. No matter who they were, as long as they were human cultivators, they could negotiate. However, if they were demon cultivators, then it would be a matter of life and death. He thought that he was quite lucky. These people had saved him, and they had no intention of killing him to steal his treasures. However, he regretted it now. What did they mean by quite lucky? He was extremely unlucky to have anything to do with these people. Forget about the shape-shifting demon cultivators. After all, demon beasts had to undergo shape-shifting heavenly tribulations to take human forms. However, what was going on with them now? That girl who had been lucky enough to obtain Fu Yaozi's inheritance actually had a nascent soul heavenly tribulation. The nascent soul heavenly tribulation was something that no one had ever heard of in the past hundreds of thousands of years. It was one thing if it was just one, but because of that girl's nascent soul heavenly tribulation, that damned disciple of the Guifang demon monarch had actually triggered half a heavenly tribulation. If he had stayed out of this matter, he would definitely have tried to rope them in after the heavenly tribulation. He wasn't an ignorant fool. He knew what a nascent soul heavenly tribulation, which hadn't appeared in hundreds of thousands of years, represented. If a cultivator could safely pass the heavenly tribulation, they would definitely possess great potential. However, he was also trapped in the heavenly tribulation and was facing the heavenly lightning. God, Nanguitian had schemed so much for the sake of the Dawning Pill sect's orthodoxy, and he was about to lose his life. Why was he so unlucky? However, it was too late for him to run now. The heavenly tribulation had already descended, and he was in the middle of it. Even if he turned around and ran, he wasn't confident that he could escape unscathed from so many heavenly lightning bolts. Therefore, he could only go all out. If he was lucky, he might be able to keep his life. However, aside from fellow Daoist Qin, these people were all in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. 2 of them had just advanced to the nascent soul realm, so it wouldn't be good for them to face the heavenly tribulation head-on. With that thought in mind, Nan Guitian turned around and discovered that things were out of his expectations. Mo Tiange was fighting against the heavenly tribulation. Magic weapons such as the art of primordial singular energy, the white silk handkerchief, the heaven and earth fan, and the 8 trigrams of Tai Chi were all out. She also used a rare defensive talisman for the nascent soul realm. Moreover, the clothes she was wearing also seemed to be some kind of treasure. Sometimes, when the heavenly lightning that was slightly weaker struck her, she would be able to withstand it. Back then, she in Qin she'd obtained a white robe from an ancient deification cultivator. It was still intact after hundreds of thousands of years, so it was obviously a top-grade defensive magic weapon. Qin she had already undergone the vermilion bird's body tempering, so he didn't need this robe, so he refined it again and gave it to her for protection. Next to her, a cultivator with fluttering white sleeves stepped forward from time to time to block some of the heavenly lightning for her. He was wearing the uniform of the great ancient cultivation group in the independent space, so his defense was incomparably strong. At first, Nan Guitian thought this was a cultivator who didn't want to reveal his identity. Later on, he discovered that although this person was nimble and strong, he didn't have the slightest human aura. He wasn't a human, but a puppet. An early-stage, nascent soul puppet. Nan Guitian knew this must be a fated chance she obtained from the Immortal Palace. He almost couldn't control his jealousy. How could this girl be so lucky? She was imprisoned in the Immortal Palace, but not only did she form her nascent soul, she came out smoothly, and she even obtained such a treasure. On the other side, Yang Qingji was releasing his primordial devil aura to fight against the heavenly lightning. When he noticed some of the heavenly lightning was rushing towards him, he was extremely shocked. He didn't understand how he triggered the heavenly tribulation. Soon after, Jing Xingji analyzed the situation. When he came out of the independent space, he should have triggered the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, but Mo Tiange triggered the heavenly tribulation instead. Compared to the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, the heavenly tribulation was a level higher. Since he was in the middle of the heavenly tribulation, he was also sensed. As a result, the nascent soul celestial phenomenon was upgraded and turned into a heavenly tribulation. However, because he was only implicated, the power of the heavenly tribulation was greatly reduced, so it could only be considered half a heavenly tribulation. Since it was only half a heavenly tribulation, it was much easier for him to deal with it. After all, he cultivated the primordial devil art. Moreover, he also absorbed all the primordial devil aura in the Immortal Palace, so his body was full of devil aura. Even if it was lightning magic, which devil cultivators were most afraid of, he wouldn't be unable to withstand it. As for Jing Xingji and Qin Shi, although it wasn't easy for them, they weren't in a very difficult situation either. This made Nan Guitian feel baffled. How could these people be so strong? As the head Grand Supreme Elder of one of the 5 great Dao cultivation groups in Yunzhong, when did his vision become so narrow? Chapter 508. The thunder in the sky gradually subsided and the heavenly tribulation came to an end. Mo Tiange looked exhausted. She sat cross-legged in the air and took advantage of the gap between the heavenly tribulation to recover some spiritual aura. She didn't expect she would trigger the nascent soul heavenly tribulation. She always thought it would be like when Qin Shi formed his nascent soul, where a nascent soul celestial phenomenon would appear. But now that things had come to this, she had no choice but to endure it. Heavenly tribulation wouldn't stop just because you didn't want to. She could only rejoice that she obtained a deification cultivator's defensive treasure robe in the Immortal Palace and made a nascent soul puppet. Otherwise, the heavenly tribulation would be difficult. According to ancient books, the minor heavenly tribulation in the nascent soul realm has 9 stages. With each stage, its power will gradually increase. If you pass the heavenly tribulation, the power of the heavenly thunder will remold your body and advance your cultivation level. If you can't, you'll be turned into ashes. Tienge, you have to hold on. Qin Shi's voice entered her ears. She opened her eyes and looked at him. The sea breeze was fierce and lightning streaked across the sky from time to time. Qin Shi looked at her with firm and gentle eyes. She smiled and nodded at him. Then she took a deep breath, stood up, and took out her magic weapons again. Her path of cultivation could be said to be bumpy and lucky, but there were always many variables. Every realm breakthrough was accompanied by many accidents. When she was building her foundation, not only did the celestial phenomenon appear, but it also lasted for more than a year. When she was forming her gold core, her fellow disciples at Xianqing School almost thought she was forming her nascent soul. Now that she was forming her nascent soul, she actually triggered the nascent soul heavenly tribulation that didn't exist anymore. She didn't know why this happened, but it was most likely related to her physique and cultivation technique. She didn't know whether this was bad luck or good luck. Maybe, after experiencing more trials, she would go further than others. Boom! With a loud noise, the 4th stage of the heavenly tribulation was about to come. Mo Tienge pointed her finger, and the white silk handkerchief turned into invisible mist, firmly protecting her. At the same time, she mobilized all the spiritual aura in her body, ready to go. In the sky, more and more white lightning gathered, illuminating the dark sea as bright as day. A moment later, a lightning pillar finally formed, but it silently struck down. Mo Tienge raised her hand and waved the heaven and earth fan. Countless flowers and plants flew out and collided with the lightning. Boom! Unsurprisingly, the flowers and plants transformed from spiritual qi were all sent flying by the heavenly lightning. However, after the collision, the heavenly lightning also disappeared without a trace. Mo Tienge's body swayed, but in the end, she managed to stand firm. Apart from the lightning pillar in the middle of the heavenly tribulation, there were also countless lesser heavenly thunders in the surroundings. These heavenly thunders struck the surface of the sea and set off huge waves. She took a handful of pills and stuffed them into her mouth, gasping for breath. Looking up, there were flashes of lightning everywhere on the surface of the sea. The pale white light illuminated the blood-red surface of the sea, which was exceptionally demonic and terrifying. Boom! Another loud sound rang out. This time, it was the manifestation tribulation of the demonic cultivator not far away. The transformation of demonic beasts into demonic cultivators was also a 9-stage heavenly tribulation. They started their tribulation at about the same time, so they should be at the 5th stage now. Roar! A deafening roar rang out, and a green-winged giant beast appeared on the surface of the sea a little further away. It was the green-winged demonic beast that had revealed its true form and faced the heavenly lightning. Boom! Boom! The heavenly lightning struck mercilessly, hitting the huge body of the green-winged giant beast. It was knocked back several dozen feet before it staggered and stopped. The power of lightning-type spells was formidable, not to mention that the heavenly lightning was the power of heaven and earth. This green-winged giant beast had a strong wood element aura, so it undoubtedly practiced wood-type spells. Moreover, the wood element just happened to be restrained by the lightning element. If this demonic beast hadn't advanced to the 8th rank long ago, it probably wouldn't have been able to withstand the might of the heavenly lightning. However, whether it was this demonic beast or the other 2 demonic beasts, they were undoubtedly distant past-era demonic beasts. They had cultivated in the distant past-era environment for a long time, so they were much stronger than the demonic beasts of today. Presumably, they had a higher chance of surviving the heavenly tribulation of transformation. Mo Tiange swept a cursory glance over them. She didn't worry about these demonic beasts. She still had to pass her own heavenly tribulation, so why should she worry about others? Moreover, her situation was even worse than these demonic beasts. She had just advanced to the next realm, so her magic weapon hadn't been refined yet. She also didn't have a strong body like these demonic beasts, so she had no idea whether she could survive the 9th stage of the heavenly tribulation. After a while, the 5th stage of the heavenly tribulation also arrived. The heavenly lightning struck her body with great power. She felt her brain go numb, and a stream of blood rushed up her throat. She struggled to hold on, suppressing her restless spiritual aura. When the heavenly lightning dissipated, Qin helped her up. Hold on 2 more times. I'll take action during the last 2 times. Mo Tiange swallowed a handful of medicinal pills. Right now, she almost treated medicinal pills like sugar pills, eating them like they cost nothing. When her breathing stabilized, she asked, "What about you?" She was right next to her. When the heavenly lightning struck, he was also within the range of the heavenly tribulation, so he also had to defend himself. "I know what I'm doing," he said. Mo Tiange nodded, believing him without a doubt. Then came the 6th stage of the heavenly tribulation, rumble. This time, the thunder was even louder. The heavenly lightning was twice as thick as before, and it struck down. Mo Tiange didn't know whether she could withstand it or not, but the heavenly tribulation couldn't be avoided. It wouldn't count unless it hit the person who was going through the tribulation. She turned her wrist, unfolding the heaven and earth fan. She poured all her spiritual aura into it, and with a crane cry, a red-crowned crane flew out of the fan to meet the heavenly lightning. The heavenly lightning hit the red-crowned crane. Without much effort, the crane turned into spiritual aura and disappeared. Soon after, it hit Mo Tiange squarely. Chi! The mist formed by the white silk handkerchief was hit by the heavenly lightning and almost dissipated. As for Mo Tiange, she was hit by the powerful force and lost her balance in the air. She fell several hundred feet before she staggered and regained her balance. When she saw the half-broken white silk handkerchief, her expression changed slightly. This magic weapon she obtained from Zhong Muling had been refined by her since she was in the foundation building realm. Its defense was very strong, and it had never failed. But today, it was actually pierced through. The 6th wave of the heavenly tribulation was already this powerful. What about the 7th wave? She wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and looked up at the sky. The tribulation clouds were gathering again. The next wave would be the 7th wave of the heavenly tribulation. She swallowed medicinal pills again, seizing the time to recover a bit of spiritual aura. She didn't have any powerful defensive magic weapons in her hands except for the white robe she was wearing. If it didn't work, she could only forcibly endure it. Presumably, this defensive magic weapon she obtained from an ancient deification cultivator should be able to save her life, right? Rumble. The heavenly lightning appeared again. This time, its color was a bit deeper than before and carried a hint of gold. Mo Tiange took a deep breath and manipulated the jade bone puppet to meet it. Crack! The heavenly lightning struck the jade bone puppet, causing its body to emit light smoke. Its spiritual aura protective cover was instantly destroyed, and its nascent soul momentum instantly dissipated. Fortunately, the puppet's frame was the crystal skeleton of an ancient deification cultivator. The white robe it was wearing was also a powerful defensive magic weapon, so it wasn't destroyed. Mo Tiange put the jade bone puppet, which had temporarily lost its cultivation level, into her Qianquan ring. The 7th wave of the heavenly tribulation was at least twice as powerful as the 6th wave, since it could strike a nascent soul puppet until it lost its cultivation level. There were still 2 more waves of the heavenly tribulation. After dispersing the small heavenly lightning next to him, she forced out several drops of blood essence and wiped the 3 young real fire sword. The sword immediately shone with a dazzling red light. Senior Martial Brother. Tienge was surprised to see this. What did he want to do by using his blood essence? Recover your spiritual aura. Shi shouted at her. Tienge paused for a moment, then obediently swallowed the medicinal pills and sat cross-legged in the air. No matter what he wanted to do, she didn't have enough confidence to pass the heavenly tribulation, so the best choice was to cooperate with him. After a while, more and more tribulation clouds appeared. The heavenly lightning finished brewing and struck again. This time, the power of the heavenly lightning was several times stronger than the last time. Before it fell, huge waves of more than 10 feet high were set off on the sea, and the roar was deafening. Shi pushed with his right hand, and the 3 young real fire sword turned into rays of red light. Soon after, he and the sword went to meet the heavenly lightning. Before, he didn't make a move and let Tienge face the heavenly tribulation alone for 2 reasons. First, her strength would improve greatly only if she personally faced the power of the heavenly tribulation. Second, he had to save his strength to help her pass the last 2 heavenly tribulations. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to face the real danger with his full strength, and they would both die under the heavenly tribulation. As the heavenly tribulation grew stronger, the cultivators on One Leaf Island gradually noticed something unusual. "Look," someone shouted. "What a big storm." Outside One Leaf Island's defensive formation, huge waves swept over and smashed fiercely on the defensive shield. At first, the defensive shield only shook a little, but as the waves got higher and higher and the impact became more and more concentrated, the defensive shield started to shake uneasily. Tsunami. An experienced and knowledgeable cultivator's expression changed in horror. With such power, it was undoubtedly a tsunami. If there were cultivators who didn't make it to One Leaf Island in time, they probably wouldn't have a chance to survive. Everyone, don't panic. One Leaf Island's market square, which was formed by various big forces, immediately came out to calm everyone down. Our One Leaf Island has nascent soul seniors keeping watch. Everything will be fine. Calm down and return to your positions. That's right. Nothing has ever happened to One Leaf Island in its history. Someone chimed and then looked up at the sky. Everyone, look. Those nascent soul seniors are still there. All the cultivators looked up one after another. When they saw several nascent soul cultivators still standing under the protective shield in the sky, they finally calmed down a little and went back to their shops or tea houses to sit down. Even if the sky collapsed, these nascent soul seniors would be there to support it. That was what they thought. At that moment, however, these nascent soul seniors weren't as relaxed as they thought. The power of the heavenly tribulation is actually this strong. Daoist Rui muttered to himself. Someone said, "What's Daoist Rui afraid of? Could it be that the restrictions on One Leaf Island can't hold on? That shouldn't be the case, right? The way I see it, the heavenly tribulation is almost over. It's time for us to go out and take a look." Daoist Rui glanced at that person and scoffed. "Fellow Daoist Song, you're being too naive. The further it goes, the more powerful the heavenly tribulation will be. If it's just one heavenly tribulation, with One Leaf Island's restrictions, it shouldn't be a problem, but 4 half-heavenly tribulations. I can't guarantee that One Leaf Island will be unscathed. 5 Elements Valley was founded on formations. Daoist Rui was the cultivator with the highest cultivation base in 5 Elements Valley, as well as the most outstanding formation master in the world. No one dared to disregard his words. That can't be, right? One Leaf Island's restrictions really can't hold on, the cultivator from before asked anxiously. Daoist Rui's expression softened. It's only a possibility. As for how powerful the heavenly tribulation was, it was just a guess. He couldn't say for sure either. When Daoist Rui saw old Donkey Ma looking into the distance without saying anything, he couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Daoist Ma, what do you think?" After a while, old Donkey Ma finally shook his head lightly. He looked at the lightning flickering on the surface of the sea and said, "It's not easy to pick up this bargain." Chapter 509. Under the tremendous might of the heavenly tribulation, the red light formed by the three young real fire sword collided with the heavenly thunder. Boom! This loud noise created a big hole in the sea. Even the seabed was affected, and the distant coast and One Leaf Island shook. Boom! Boom! Several more thunderclaps were heard. The other people's eighth tribulation came down one after another. The defensive barrier above their heads shook and almost broke. Daoist Rui's expression changed slightly. He said, "Not good," then he turned into a flight light and flew down. The range of the eighth heavenly tribulation exceeded everyone's expectations. One Leaf Island's restrictions showed faint signs of collapsing. Daoist Rui was rushing over to take charge of the formation. If the formation was not repaired in time, One Leaf Island would probably be destroyed when the ninth heavenly tribulation arrived. One Leaf Island was only a market square, but if it was really destroyed, it wouldn't be good for the big forces. In their sects, most of the cultivators in the core formation realm and above came from One Leaf Island. The other cultivators from the big sects hesitated for a moment before they also turned into flight lights and followed Daoist Rui. The opportunity was rare, but One Leaf Island couldn't be destroyed. In the air, only old Donkey Ma and two cultivators unrelated to the big sects were left. "Fellow Daoist Ma," one of them said, "in your opinion, this ninth tribulation..." Old Donkey Ma glanced at them and said with a faint smile, "Fellow Taoists, I can't say for sure about this. If we want to take advantage of it, we can only rely on our luck and means." Aside from the nascent soul cultivators on One Leaf Island, Qin was forced to retreat by the eighth wave of the heavenly tribulation. He only managed to stabilize himself after falling several hundred feet. As for the red light formed by the three young real fire sword, most of it had already dissipated. "Senior Marshal Brother!" Mo Tiange shouted. This time, Qin blocked most of the power of the tribulation, so the impact she suffered was actually smaller than the seventh tribulation. Qin waved his hand to show that he was fine. He swallowed a medicinal pill and seized the time to recover his spiritual aura. Mo Tiange saw that he didn't seem to be seriously injured, so she also sat cross-legged to adjust her breath. After the eighth tribulation, the sea regained its temporary calm. Yang Qingji also successfully passed the eighth tribulation. The power of his heavenly tribulation was halved, which was much better than Mo Tiange's. Moreover, he had the heavenly demon tower. Among the 5 holy artifacts, it was a truly powerful magic treasure. Ever since he obtained it, he had refined it for several decades. Even though he had just formed his nascent soul, it was still quite powerful. As for the 3 demonic beasts, the green-winged giant beast was the most heavily injured. Its cultivation was the lowest, and it was a wood elemental beast, so it was perfectly countered by the heavenly lightning. However, it had transformed for a long time, and its body was tough. Even though it was injured, it still managed to hold on. Needless to say, the other 2 demonic beasts were already at the 9th rank, and they were stronger than the green-winged giant beast. On the surface of the sea, the 3 beasts and 2 humans were accumulating their strength, waiting for the most crucial 9th heaven tribulation to descend. If they survived this heavenly tribulation, they would reach the heavens in a single bound. When the demonic beasts officially became beast cultivators, their already strong bodies would be strengthened further, and their abilities would also go up a level. Mo Tiange and Yang Qingji's strength would also increase greatly, and their future prospects would be bright. In the sky, the faint sound of thunder could be heard. The tribulation clouds continued to gather, but the heavenly thunder did not descend. Jing Xingji looked at the sky worriedly. This wasn't a good sign. The longer the tribulation clouds gathered, the more powerful the upcoming heavenly tribulation would be. Apart from the person facing the tribulation, outsiders like them who were in the tribulation would also be implicated. He looked at Qin Shi and Mo Tiange, then clenched his teeth angrily. Why was he so unlucky to run into these two jinxes? Not to mention being trapped in the Immortal Palace for dozens of years. After all, he obtained a lot of benefits, but now, he was implicated by the heavenly tribulation for no reason. What was going on? Nascent soul tribulation was something that didn't exist in the current cultivation world, yet they were able to attract it. Unfortunately, he couldn't run even if he wanted to. If they couldn't pass the tribulation, he wouldn't be able to either. It was too late to say all this now. The heavenly tribulation was right in front of him. What else could he do? He stared at the still water sword he meticulously refined, pondered for a long time, then sighed. Fellow Daoist Nan. Jing Xingji glanced at Nan Guitian, who wasn't far away. Nan Guitian had just finished adjusting his breath. Although he wasn't prepared at first and looked a bit embarrassed, he was an experienced nascent soul cultivator, so he adjusted his mentality and faced the heavenly tribulation rationally. Upon hearing Jing Xingji's voice, he shifted his gaze. Fellow Daoist, what can I do for you? Jing Xingji looked at Yang Qingji and said, if they don't pass the tribulation, we'll probably have to bear the remaining power of the heavenly tribulation. What do you think, fellow Daoist Nan? Nan Guitian hesitated for a moment, then said with a smile, what else can I do? Let's wait and see. Jing Xingji didn't seem to be joking with him at all. He said solemnly, fellow Daoist Nan, the heavenly tribulation is coming. Do you still want to talk nonsense? We can't escape the scope of the heavenly tribulation. Helping them is helping ourselves. I'll go help those two. I'll leave fellow Daoist Yang to you. What do you think? Jing Xingji didn't wait for him to answer. He turned around and flew towards Mo Tiange. Nan Guitian sighed silently as he stared at Jing Xingji's back. Thunder rumbled in the sky. The ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation was about to finish brewing. Qin Shi and Mo Tiange stood up and prepared to deal with it. Both of them had solemn expressions on their faces. They were ready to go. Whether they lived or died, whether they could reach the heavens in a single bound or stop on the path to immortality, it all depended on this. The heavenly lightning hadn't descended yet, but the howling of gales had already resounded. Huge waves rose and fell on the surface of the sea like a huge, malevolent beast that wanted to swallow everything. Boom! The tribulation clouds finally finished gathering. Under the lightning, traces of golden heavenly lightning could be seen in the tribulation clouds. Mo Tiange's heart sank. Golden lightning. This ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation was genuine golden lightning. Golden lightning was one of the most powerful lightning-type spells. Her luck was really too good. She didn't have much time to think. The golden lightning of the ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation had already struck her. She took out the half-broken white silk handkerchief and took out all the magic weapons she could possibly use. Even if all the treasures she had were destroyed, she had to withstand this heavenly tribulation. The golden lightning was dazzling. The first to meet the heavenly tribulation head-on was still Qin Shi's 3-yang real fire sword. Although he had a lot of treasures on him, most of his divine abilities were based on this natal magic weapon. The golden lightning was blocked by the 3-yang real fire sword, but it only stopped for a moment before it smashed the sword lights and continued to attack Mo Tiange. The moment the sword formation was smashed, Qin mind was greatly injured, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The three-yang real fire sword was his natal magic weapon. It had been nourished for 200 years, so it could hurt both people and people. Mo Tiange's heart skipped a beat when she saw this, but the heavenly tribulation was right in front of her. She clenched her teeth and attacked the golden lightning with several magic weapons one after another. The only defensive magic weapons she had were the white silk handkerchief and the white robe. Now that the white silk handkerchief was half destroyed, the white robe alone might not be able to resist the golden lightning, so she could only use offense as defense. Boom! The spirit cloud's Rui collided with the golden lightning and was instantly smashed into pieces. Then, the magic weapons Lord Daoist Jinghe gave her when she formed her gold core, flying swords, stone seals, jade bottles, and so on, all went up to meet the golden lightning. Under the self-destructing attacks of several magic weapons, the golden lightning's momentum weakened a bit, but it still pounced on her with indomitable will. In such a short period of time, Mo Tiange had almost used up all the offensive magic weapons she could use. Seeing that the golden lightning was still incomparably powerful, she had no choice but to open the heaven and earth fan, determined to risk her life. If she couldn't pass the heavenly tribulation, she would die. No matter how many magic weapons she had, they would be useless. Swish! The heaven and earth fan met the golden lightning and made a soft sound. In an instant, Mo Tiange was greatly shocked. She clearly felt that under the heavenly tribulation, the golden lightning carried the power of heaven and earth. In comparison, her own power was so insignificant. Could she really pass the heavenly tribulation? Until now, when she directly faced the ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation, she suddenly had such doubts. At that moment, she heard a clear sound. Not far away, a sword light shone and slowly turned into countless sword lights. In the end, the sword lights gathered into a ball and rushed towards the golden lightning with incredible speed. Cough! She took a deep breath, stood up and muttered, "The gain and loss sword of the three swords of the secular world. You're finally willing to use your unique skill." When the sword lights encountered the golden lightning, they split into two and attacked from both sides. Boom! The sound of the collision this time was even louder than the previous one. On Jing Xingji's side, however, he didn't stop. He also forced out his blood essence. The sword lights gathered again and once again attacked the golden lightning. Boom! Boom! With another two sword strikes, the golden lightning's periphery was smashed and its power was greatly reduced. Puff! Jing Xingji's face was deathly pale. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, but his whole body relaxed. "I've used all three sword strikes. I've done you guys justice." Mo Tiange was still fighting against the golden lightning. Although the spiritual aura released by the heaven and earth fan was being compressed inch by inch, she was still doing her best to hold on. She didn't know whether she could hold on or not, but if she gave up, she would only die. She'd swallowed a medicinal pill, then made a hand seal. A red light appeared indistinctly in his dantian. The red light became brighter and brighter until it gradually deepened into the color of fire. Soon after, a simple and unadorned longbow burning with flames emerged from his body. He held the bow and pulled the bowstring. Flames sprang out of his arm and formed the shape of an arrow on the bow. He bent the bow like a full moon and aimed at the golden lightning. He then let go, and the flame arrow flew towards the golden lightning as fast as a meteor. The cry of a phoenix resounded. The flame arrow turned into a fiery red vermilion bird and collided with the golden lightning. Boom! The power this time was far greater than before. The incomparably powerful golden lightning finally couldn't bear it and shook, dissipating more than half of it. Cough! She frowned. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and tried to condense the vermilion bird's flames again. However, the arrow just now almost exhausted his remaining strength. The vermilion bird's flames he released couldn't condense and form a flame arrow. Whether it was Jing Xingji or Qin Shi, they couldn't attack again. Mo Tiange clenched her teeth and touched the space between her eyebrows, forcing out several drops of blood essence and smearing them on the heaven and earth fan. In an instant, the heaven and earth fan shone brightly. Blood essence was the purest part of a cultivator's body. Every cultivator above the core formation realm knew how to use blood essence to strengthen their magic weapons. However, once blood essence was used, their cultivation level would be greatly damaged, so not everyone was willing to use it. She didn't use it before because it was her last resort. If she used her blood essence and couldn't withstand the heavenly tribulation, she could only resign herself to fate. Now, in order to help her, Qin Shi and Jing Xingji didn't hesitate to use their blood essence, causing their strength to be greatly damaged. They couldn't attack again, so she didn't need to hold back anymore. Whether she lived or died, this was the gamble. Under the nourishment of the blood essence, the momentum of the heaven and earth fan suddenly soared. Mo Tiange made a hand seal, and countless rocks, flowers flew out of the fan and attacked the golden lightning. Boom! 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 The sound lingered on, and the golden lightning was scattered little by little. However, in the end, the golden lightning still wasn't completely defeated. Feeling the spiritual aura in her body slowly dissipating, Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. Was her path to immortality really going to end today? I'm not willing. I'm still a little bit away, just a little bit away. She turned to look at Qin Shi. Senior Marshal brother, I'm really sorry. If it weren't for me, you'd definitely be able to go further, right? Qin Shi smiled back at her. Although he also felt very regretful, he didn't regret this kind of ending. In the next moment, she heard Jing Xingji's incredulous voice. This is, roar. A deafening roar rang out. From the heaven and earth fan, an azure dragon soared up to meet the golden lightning. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.